TV, on radio and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 10.
Good morning, I'm Zora Suleiman. Preparations are underway for a parade and a pageant that'll bring the Platinum Jubilee celebrations to a close today. Around 10,000 people, including 6,000 performers, will be involved in staging a nearly 2-mile-long carnival procession in the capital. While leading the proceedings will be the 260-year-old Gold State Coach, which carried the Queen to and from her coronation in 1953. Well, last night, 22,000 people attended a special star-studded concert outside Buckingham Palace. It featured a number of artists, including Diana Ross, George Ezra and Sir Elton John. Well, there was a surprise sketch with Paddington Bear, who joined the monarch, who revealed she had a marmalade sandwich in her handbag. Well, more than 30 members of the royal family attended, including Prince George and Princess Charlotte, while Prince Charles and William took to the stage to pay tribute to Her Majesty.
You have met us and talked with us. You laugh and cry with us. And most importantly, you have been there for us for these 70 years. You pledged to serve your whole life. You continue to deliver.
It's my firm hope that my grandmother's words are as true in 70 years' time as they are tonight. That as nations we come together in common cause, because then there is always room for hope.
In other news, missiles have hit the Ukrainian capital Kyiv after a period of relative calm in the city. Mayor Vitaly Klitschko says there's been no deaths reported so far. It comes as the UK Ministry of Defence says counterattacks by Ukraine have blunted Russian momentum in the city of Severodonetsk. The governor of the Luhansk region suggested that the city is now split in half between Ukrainian and Russian forces. The Met Police has referred itself to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. It's after officers were called to Chelsea Bridge in southwest London following reports of a man armed with a screwdriver. He was challenged and then tasered but fell into the River Thames. He's now in a critical condition. And it's believed Boris Johnson could face a vote of no confidence as soon as this week. Dozens of Conservative MPs have publicly called on the Prime Minister to resign. It's after the Sue Gray report strongly criticised his role in the Partygate scandal. It comes as a new poll for the Sunday Times suggests that the Conservatives are on course to lose the Red Wall seat Wakefield by more than 20 points in an upcoming by-election. Well, that's the latest. Now time for today's weather.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV weather.
Overcast with showers for central and southern parts. There is a thunderstorm warning in place until 6 o'clock this evening. However, it will be fine elsewhere with plenty of sunshine. Well, for Scotland, it will be another fine and dry day and could be the warmest day of the year so far there. Northern Ireland will also be dry. Northern England will see lots of sunny spells with cloud increasing later in the day. In the south, outbreaks of rain are likely. Showers are also possible for Wales and the Midlands, turning rather heavy and thundery at times, possibly leading to some high rainfall totals and surface water issues in places. But there will be some sun for southern England and Wales too. So to recap, rain slowly edging northwards, drier in the south.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV weather.
On my fantasy talk show, it's still a fantasy, yeah? Who would be my 3 guests? Piers, undoubtedly. The Queen. Margaret Thatcher, nailed on.
And a very, very good morning to you, one and all of you listening and watching on this extraordinary, remarkable Platinum Jubilee weekend. You're listening to Tice Talk. We're 3.5 days into this incredible celebration. And although I look outside and it's a bit grey and it's a bit murky, the forecast is better for this afternoon. And I think we can ignore that. Everyone's had such fun, such joy, such passion, and I think such gratitude to the Queen. And it's really brought back a sense of pride. And I want to be talking about, you know, being proud to be British, pride in our flag, the Union Jack. And I want to hear from you throughout the show with your thoughts, what you've been up to. For me, there's been so much joy. But seeing the Queen yesterday, having tea with Paddington Bear, I roared with laughter. It so reminded me of the Queen with James Bond at the start of the Olympics. We're going to be following as to whether or not the Queen is going to make it to the pageant this afternoon. The rumours that she's very keen to. She'll be trying, of course, extremely hard. And we're going to be touching also throughout the whole show on the hangover after the party, the cost of living, food prices, possible shortages and that sort of thing. But this really is one of the most extraordinary weekends in history, and maybe it's a turning point for us all. And my question to you is, what are you doing? How are you celebrating? Street parties? Call us. Even possibly send us a video of what you're doing, seeing if we can get you on the show. Will our pride and our joy and our sort of respect for the Union Jack, will that gain more confidence, a resurgence? I want your thoughts. What are your memories of the Queen? Have you met her? Have you been here to do? Have you met any of the other members of the royal family? Give us a call. Let us know. And how do you think the gradual transition is going to Prince Charles and Prince William in terms of, picking up the reins of the monarchy looking forwards? And of course, I'll be talking as well in my Sunday sermon about the dedication of the Queen. And I want your thoughts, your views, 0344 499 1000. This is the moment, of course, when you can release to everybody, to me and everybody listening, watching, your joy, your frustrations, your anxieties. I may not be able to cure them, but I'll certainly let you air them. And it's a better show when you call, when we get your input. You know the number, 0344 499 1000, but also tweet us at Talk TV or text us 87222 using the word talk. You're listening to Tice Talk here on Talk TV. That music, of course, confirms that it's time for my Sunday sermon, and I always like to focus on a particular word or couple of words. And for me, this weekend of celebration, obviously I want to focus on Her Majesty the Queen and how she leads by example. I mean, she's possibly shows the greatest leadership by example. To lead as monarch for 70 years, through so many changes, what she's seen, so many highs and lows in the history of our beloved nation. She's always been there. She's always been leading from the front. Truly extraordinary. The degree of commitment, of devotion to her people, of dedication, and always that sense of optimism, a love for her country and all of her people. Never complaining. Never complaining. She's always taken the long view, that with goodwill, hope and kindness, that actually good will prevail. And I think we can all learn from that. She's always, always believed in her country, believed in her people, and cared passionately for her people. And so often, she's been the person with the right words of hope, of comfort, of thanks, of reassurance, of understanding, and crucially, of inspiration. We all need inspiration, and I think the Queen gives that to so many of us, so often. I'll never forget, who could forget, on the 5th of April 2020, in the depths of COVID, there was so much anxiety, so much concern, when she gave her speech to the nation, the remarkable words she used that brought a tear to so many eyes. She invoked Vera Lynn's infamous words, "We'll meet again." when she said, better days will return. We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again. And actually, how right she was. And of course, here we are, just over 2 years on. And actually, we are celebrating. We're meeting again. We're able to enjoy all the things we always used to enjoy. Her ability to take that long view at that difficult time. And so often, she has been truly our rock, our foundation, our inspiration. And I believe she's the United Kingdom's greatest icon. She's the greatest unifying influence that we have. And indeed, she's the greatest asset we have in terms of diplomacy, in terms of the promotion of UK PLC. And even in times of troubles and adversity, which inevitably happens to any nation, to all of us, any people, she shines through as a beacon of light, able to bring people together, not only on a national basis, but also on a global basis. She is so respected, so admired, all over the world. And she displays an incredible capacity through her whole reign for hard work. Rarely has she ever put a foot wrong. And I think one thing is compassion. The compassion that she shows for her people, for those in suffering, for those in pain, for those who are vulnerable. And I think she has an incredible, amazing ability to deal with and to promote that delicate balance between tradition, the best of what we've always had in our great history, but also modernising, going forwards, looking forwards, not only as a nation, but also as a monarchy. And that, of course, is the great challenge for Prince Charles, the Prince of Wales, and Prince William going forwards. The Queen, of course, she's actually the most famous woman in the world. I think she's the most remarkable woman. And she's probably amongst the most influential women that's ever been in the world, and possibly ever will be. I suspect that in future generations, people will never see the likes of her again. And what she stands for is that embodiment of pride, of courage, and belief in our true national spirit. I wonder sometimes whether we take her comforting presence, that rock-like foundation, do we take it for granted? Do we take her strength for granted? Because in all our lives, we never stop learning, and I think that's really important. And we can all learn from some of her strengths as a shining beacon, a beacon of enthusiasm. That smile that we've seen and enjoyed recently, remarkable. Her hope, her optimism, that we could always do better and better, that we can believe in ourselves, and that with optimism, with hope, actually we can make progress. As Prince William, in his words last night at the party at the palace, as he said, hope, goodwill, optimism, that can take us forward. Without question, without any doubt at all. I mean, I've talked about treasure in a variety of ways, but I actually believe that the Queen, she is the ultimate national treasure. And as her son, Prince Charles, said last night, as he said, as a subject, but also as her son, he said, thank you. So I dedicate this Sunday sermon to Her Majesty the Queen with the simple words, I think on behalf of all of us, Your Majesty, thank you. And with that, here endeth this Sunday morning my Sunday sermon. And I was hoping we'd have some joyous organ music, but that seems to have disappeared. But no worries. I want to hear from you, 0344 499 1000, with what your experiences are, what your views of the monarchy are. Have you met the Queen? Have you drawn inspiration, enthusiasm, comfort, joy from what she's been able to say and the way she's been able to lead us? That crucial question. And are you drawing extra strength in the Union Jack, extra reassurance? You know, that is our national symbol, and I think we should view it with strong pride, with deep pride. Sometimes recently you fear we're not allowed to, but actually I think there's a great reawakening of that sense of pride, of belief in ourselves. But I want to hear from you. How do you feel the gradual transition to Prince Charles and Prince William taking the reins, taking the helm of the monarchy, whether it's the trooping of the colour, attending different events, you know, dealing with ceremonies, knighthoods and things? Do you feel that that's progressing well? Do you think they could do better? Are you confident in the future of the monarchy? This is such a joyous moment for us all, but it's also a remarkable moment in history. How are you feeling about it? Are you feeling good? And I want to hear also, what have you been doing over the last couple of days? What parties have you had? I must tell you, I was at a great street party on Friday, and the egg and spoon races, the inevitable cheating, the sack races, people putting their feet through the sacks, the tug of war amongst the children. Hear this, it was girls v boys, and unbelievably, not once, not twice, but 3 times. Yes, the girls beat the boys in the tug of war. Has anybody else seen that? I want to hear your thoughts. Coming up after the break, we are going to be talking to the legend of royal commentary, a former press secretary to the Queen for 12 years, Dickie Arbiter, with his thoughts on how the weekend is going, whether or not the Queen will make it for the royal pageant. Don't forget, you know the number, 0344 499 1000. You are, of course, listening to the home of common sense, the home of pride. It's Talk TV. Welcome back to Tice Talk this Sunday morning, towards the end of this incredible 4-day celebration of the Platinum Jubilee. Her Majesty the Queen, I dedicated my Sunday sermon to it, but I want to hear from you as well. You know the number. What you've been up to. What extraordinary street parties have you been at? Did you enjoy the party at the Palace? Who was your favourite singer? Have any of you also, you may remember, a few weeks back, we actually tasted the Jubilee recipe in the studio that was made by Tonya Buxton, the lemon Swiss roll and amaretti trifle, which I'm a great fan of. Have any of you made that Jubilee recipe? Have any of you enjoyed it? If not, what else have you made? What special cakes? How's it been decorated? I want to hear anything that you think you'd like to share with us all. But also to share with us his thoughts. I've probably got one of the most experienced royal commentators who was press secretary to the Queen, Dickie Arbiter, LVO, who is with us now. Dickie, a very good morning to you. Thanks
morning, Richard,
for being with me on Tice Talk. What a day. Forget the grim, gloomy, grey weather. It's going to get better. This weekend, I think, has been... It must have excelled all expectations. Presumably, hopefully, the Palace are pleased with progress, the way it's gone?
They're probably very pleased, and if they're not, why not? I mean, last night's concert was something that has never, ever been seen in the UK. In fact, I doubt whether it's ever been seen globally. It was absolutely flawless. Those graphics in the sky created by drones, the projections onto the facade of Buckingham Palace. But, you know, come on, the concert was brilliant. Every act was brilliant. But there was one just slightly bit better than that, and that was the Queen taking tea with Paddington Bear.
Wasn't it amazing? I roared with laughter. I actually had to watch it 3 times. I enjoyed it so much. I just couldn't believe it. And, you know, it invoked memories of James Bond in 2012.
Yeah, well, if we thought that one was good, then this one was even better. She got a BAFTA for the James Bond sequence. I think on this one, she should get an Oscar from the States, a Golden Globe, a Palme d'Or from France, and another BAFTA.
And Dickie, who would have come up with that idea, and how does it work in terms of presenting that idea to Her Majesty? Mum, we've got a great idea for you.
Well, the producers of the show would have sort of been doing a bit of brainstorming, not a bit of brainstorming, they would have done a lot of brainstorming. What can they do differently? Well, differently, obviously, was graphics on the facade, drones doing the graphics up in the sky, that magnificent stage setting. It was second to none. And they were probably looking for something really, really special, a bit like Danny Boyle for the Olympics, looking for something very special, coming up with James Bond. Somebody's got to ask. Princess Anne was on the Olympic Committee. They asked her to ask her and said, no, you want it, you ask her. So they did. So the producers would have put it to her. The Queen has a tremendous sense of humour. She has a tremendous sense of fun. I mean, look at that last night. Both Paddington Bear and Her Majesty tapping their glass to Queen's We Will Rock You. What an opening to the show.
Absolutely amazing. So actually, it wouldn't have gone through Prince William or Prince Charles. It would have gone straight into her office, would it, this suggestion?
It would have gone straight into her office, and her office would have gone straight up to her, knowing full well that if she could do it, she would do it. And my goodness, she did.
Absolutely incredible. And they will have obviously filmed that in recent days. And presumably they would have had a variety of different ideas. And so they then have to decide which one's the best.
Well, there might well have been a variety of ideas, but Paddington Bear is very much to the fore. Paddington Bear is very, very British, and why not use Paddington Bear? After all, the Queen was at Paddington Station last week, opening the new Elizabeth line. So what better character to have tea with the Queen?
It's such a great link indeed. And finally, we discover what's in her handbag, Dickie. You know, in all those years, we've been wondering.
We have been wondering. It's a marmalade sandwich.
It's a marmalade sandwich. If any of you listening or watching haven't seen the Paddington Bear sketch with the Queen at the start of the concert, just go onto social media, go onto YouTube or whatever, find it and enjoy it. It's an absolute must-watch for me. I just found it hysterical. Just so refreshing in so many ways, and so sort of modernising and showing how in touch, Dickie, that the Queen is with... with so many people's lives.
She is so much in touch with so many people's lives. There was a time 30 years ago when Fleet Street's greatest used to accuse the Queen of being out of touch. She is more in touch with what is going on, not just in the UK, not just in the nations, not just in the Commonwealth, but globally than any politician. And in fact, all politicians put together. She knows exactly what is going on. You could never pull the wool over her eyes about anything.
And that's obviously a sense of her, you know, her longevity, but also her deep interest in her people and what's going on in the world, but also, I guess, the quality of the people briefing her. You know, when she meets presidents of other countries, when she meets the Prime Minister so often, that hard work, that capacity for hard work, I think we all underestimate how much she puts in.
People do underestimate. It is a lot of hard work. She reads her briefing notes assiduously. Any questions, she will ask them. Invariably, there aren't any questions because the notes have everything there. The I's have been dotted, the T's have been crossed before they go up to her. I remember once saying to her years ago, recommending a book. And she said, I don't have time to read. I go through my boxes maybe 2 or 3 times a day, by which time I'm totally read out. So she does read absolutely everything. She still gets about 300 personal letters a day. She doesn't read all of them. There isn't the time, but she reads some of them. Some of them she replies to personally. Others are replied to by her staff. Every letter that does go to Buckingham Palace does get a reply. So, yes, she's on top of her game.
That's fantastic. And we hope that, in a sense, the sort of suggestions she may be able to appear this afternoon briefly at the pageant. Have you got any insight in that for us yet, Dickie?
No, I think it's all very much last moment. She is troubled with mobility issues. I think it's her knees. She had 2 operations on her knees in 2003, right knee in January, left knee in December. Here we are 19 years on, and they're troubling her again. And if she is in pain, then that'll preclude her from doing anything. She might have well been in pain on Thursday when she appeared twice on the balcony, trooping the colour. But she knew that she had to do it. And because she knew she had to do it, she did do it.
Absolutely, and they've obviously, people have managed her schedule, you know, to try and maximise the chance of her appearing this weekend. Just before we break, Dickie, I talked in my sermon about her being a sort of foundation stone for the United Kingdom. And in a sense, Prince Charles and Prince William, as the gradual transition's happening, to what extent are they building another foundation stone? And is that happening strong enough, well enough so far?
I believe the Prince of Wales has been building a foundation stone ever since he left the Navy in the 1970s. He's been building it assiduously with his various charities. Look at the Prince's Trust, an organisation that is dedicated to helping young people, whether they're unemployed, whether they're young offenders, whether they're homeless, whether they've got an entrepreneurial idea and need a soft loan. He is there for them. He is there for the health service, for architecture, for the arts. So he's already built his foundation. There's still more to do, probably, he thinks. Prince William is doing exactly the same. You know, Prince Charles, everybody thought he was a bit weird talking about the environment in the 1970s and 80s. He was only taking up the mantle created by his father in the 1950s, right. And subsequently William has taken it up as well. That Dickie, speech last night was
Stay with us. I just want one more question after the break. Dickie Arbiter, royal commentator, you're with us on Tice Talk on Talk TV.
I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I'm a Talk TV presenter. The last tweet that I really liked was a guy on a petrol forecourt who tweeted, "I've just seen a guy on pump 3 fill up with £10 worth of petrol. Where's he driving to? Pump 4? 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, never miss a moment with Talk TV."
This is Talk TV News.
Good morning, I'm Zora Suleiman. It's the fourth and final day of national celebrations for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. Last night, 22,000 people attended a special star-studded concert outside Buckingham Palace. It featured a whole host of artists, including Diana Ross, Sir Elton John and George Ezra. Well, there was a surprise sketch with Paddington Bear, who joined the monarch, who revealed she had a marmalade sandwich inside her handbag. Well, more than 30 members of the royal family attended, including Prince George and Princess Charlotte, while Prince Charles and William took to the stage to pay tribute to Her Majesty.
It's my firm hope that my grandmother's words are as true in 70 years' time as they are tonight. That as nations we come together in common cause, because then there is always room for hope.
At Buckingham Palace, preparations are underway for a parade and a pageant. It'll bring the Platinum Jubilee celebrations to a close today. Leading the proceedings will be the 260-year-old gold state coach, which carried the Queen to and from her coronation in 1953. In other news, missiles have hit the Ukrainian capital Kyiv after a period of relative calm in the city. Mayor Vitaly Klitschko says there's been no deaths reported so far. It comes as the UK Ministry of Defence says counterattacks by Ukraine have blunted Russian momentum in the city of Severodonetsk. The governor of Luhansk region suggests that the city is now split in half between Ukrainian and Russian forces. And it's believed Boris Johnson could face a vote of no confidence as soon as this week. Dozens of Conservative MPs have publicly called on the Prime Minister to resign. It's after the Sue Gray report strongly criticised his role in the Partygate scandal. That's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Welcome back to Tice Talk here on Talk TV this Sunday morning. A morning towards the end of the four-day celebration. What a celebration it's been. And I want to hear from you, 0344 499 1000, what you've been up to, your thoughts, how much you've enjoyed it, what's been special, what's gone wrong. I've just been talking to Dickie Arbiter, former press secretary to the Queen for some 12 years, who's still with me. Dickie, just finally, just reflecting on... we were touching just before the break, that foundation stone. And you're talking about the Prince of Wales building a new foundation stone. To what extent is Prince William also building his own foundation as he looks forward to decades ahead?
Prince William started building his foundation once he left private air ambulance service. And we listened to his speech last night about the environment. He's passionate about that, as his father was, as his grandfather was, and as his grandmother is. So his cornerstone is built on the environment, built on climate change, built on health issues. He's very much following in his father's footsteps, but in his own style. And it's very important that he creates his own style, which he has started to do. And it's very important that people listen to him. They listened to him last night. They listened to the Queen, and they've listened to Prince Charles more recently than they used to, say, 20 years ago.
And of course, it's remarkable that it was the Duke of Edinburgh who, in a sense, decades ahead, his focus on conservation and the environment was he was a pioneer, wasn't he?
He was a pioneer. He started talking about it in the 1950s, and people scratched their head and sort of wondered, what is this guy talking about? Pollution and the environment was way over our heads. I remember as a kid being brought up in London, the smogs of the late 1940s, early 1950s. They were yellow pea soupers. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. That was pollution at its utmost. And Prince Philip was a driving force to the Clean Air Act. It was Parliament that decided it, but he was pushing it on the environmental front.
Remarkable, all of them in a way looking forwards, and I think all of us should look forward with confidence to the future of the monarchy. Dickie Arbiter, thank you so much for joining me here on Tice Talk on Talk TV this Sunday morning. That was Dickie Arbiter, but now we're going to take your calls, your tweets. We've got a great tweet here from Groovy Songs. I got a letter from the Palace in 1995 that said that Princess Diana thanked you for the song that you wrote, and the song was called Diana Dickey there was talking about the fact that every letter gets a reply from Buckingham Palace, and that in itself is leading by an example. You can't please everybody, of course. Alex here has just tweeted in, the royal family's carbon footprint is outrageous. How can they preach about it? Thank you for that, Alex. The Bun clearly thinks that I'm boring and talking drivel, so that was the summary of his tweet, but there we go. You can't please everybody. Steve in Leicester, good morning to you. How are you feeling about this Jubilee weekend?
Oh, I just think it's absolutely brilliant. It just shows that we do everything better than everyone else. The sense of pride you get just by watching it, from the trooping of the colour to last night. You mentioned earlier the opening ceremony of the Olympics. Everything we do spot on. And no other country in the world has got what we had last night. Or
what was your indeed? And obviously, inevitably, at the party at the palace, which went on for a couple of hours, you'll prefer sort of some bits more than others. What was your favourite bit of it last night?
Oh, yours, the Paddington Bear sketch. Yes. It just set it off perfectly.
It was just hysterical. Absolutely set it off perfectly.
It was brilliant.
Yeah,
I watched it like you 3 times, and you laugh your head off at it, and it just shows the Queen is a human and got a sense of humour. Even though she does insist on everything being done correctly, she doesn't like corners cut, but she's still got the sense of humour and humanity.
And I think, in a sense, we perhaps often don't appreciate that sense of humour. Her former Press Secretary, Dickie Arbiter, was referring to that actually, she's got a great sense of humour, loves a laugh. I
think that's...
that's very powerful. And I think we probably do, in the sort of the solemn sense of being, a sovereign monarch, we sometimes forget that.
Yeah, and we should never lose it. But there's talk about cutting down the royal family, streamlining it, or doing away with it altogether. We should never do that. We should never, ever even think about doing that.
And do you think...
Because we need what we had this weekend.
Well, I think that's right. And we do these events better than anybody, and people have been talking about that all over the world, actually, just how well we produce these things, these celebrations. And do you feel that the transition to sort of new foundation stones being created by the Prince of Wales and indeed Prince William, do you think that's going well? Do you think they're going fast enough, strong enough? How do you feel about that?
Oh, I think they are going well enough. Fast enough, I don't know. I don't know enough about it, to be honest. But well enough.
But well enough.
To be honest, I think we ought to... No disrespect to Charles. I think William should be the next king.
Oh, well, there you are. That's one thought. Others may have a view on that. We'll hear that through the show. Steve, thank you very much indeed for that. We're going to head south from Leicester down to Ashford, where it's probably not very sunny if it's not sunny here in London. Lenny, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm chickadee-boo, thank you, Richard. Everything is really nice, thank you.
Excellent. And have you been out and about celebrating this weekend?
No, I haven't. I made a real muck-up of everything, and I didn't organise it properly, so I haven't been participating a lot. I was hoping to go to a party tomorrow, but the person who was getting me the tickets was as good as me as organising, and we didn't get them. So,
but you've enjoyed it on TV.
Yes. Yeah, no problem at all.
Oh, well, that's great. Any other thoughts about the whole weekend? Do you think...
my biggest concern is because we've had a Queen who is respected, the most respected woman on our shores and the Commonwealth has ever been. And that is our Queen, is respect. And that is why she's been a success. And I am very, very concerned about Charles becoming king because the respect will not be there. I don't believe the respect will be the same for him as it is for his mother.
Now, there's an interesting point, Lenny. He'll have to work at it, won't he?
Well, I believe that when you are born, when Charles was born, your apprenticeship starts from the day you are born on how to act and how to become king.
Absolutely.
And he blew it. And we've got no respect. I look at Charles through the same eyes as I look at Andrew.
Wow.
And I truly...
Harsh words there, Lenny.
Well, I always tell you the truth.
No, that's right. Tell it as it is, Lenny.
Yeah, Jane. And I don't look at the two of them any different. And I truly hope and pray that common sense comes to the surface, and William is made king, so that we can go have the respect for the monarchy, and it will survive in our land and the Commonwealth.
Well, let's certainly hope that it survives. Whether or not it goes straight to William, I doubt. But Lenny, thank you for your thoughts there. That was Lenny in Ashford, wondering whether the monarch should pass straight on to Prince William. You might have views on that. We've got some wonderful tweets coming in. Albion Queen has tweeted in, "My grandson's celebrating with their homemade cupcakes," from Kim. Let's hope they were delicious. I want your thoughts, your views on all of that. Coming up after the break, we'll be talking to Richard Kemp, Colonel Richard Kemp. You're listening to Tice Talk on Talk TV. Welcome back. We're in the first hour of Tice Talk here this Sunday morning, the fourth and final day of the Platinum Jubilee celebrations. The weather may be lifting a little bit. We've got lots of messages tweets, texts coming in. One here which says, good morning, Richard. Good to see Harry and Meghan. Oh, it's disappeared. Basically good to see Harry and Meghan back with the royal family in the UK. I agree with that, actually. Maybe this is a moment of reconciliation. That would be a good thing. Let's hope that they meet up soon. Anyway, we're now going to be talking to Colonel Richard Kemp, former commander of the British forces in Afghanistan, because I want to know about the ties between the royal family and the military over decades, centuries, have actually been incredibly strong. Richard, a very good morning to you. Thanks for joining me on Tice Talk. You're in the forces. How strong is that link between the royal family and the Queen and the military? I think I'm right in saying she was Colonel-in-Chief of some 16 regiments. Is that right?
Yeah, and every regiment and major unit of the armed forces has a member of the royal family as essentially their commander-in-chief, their colonel-in-chief or equivalent. And they're not ceremonial appointments; they're formal appointments. Of course, the Queen didn't command directly any of those regiments she was colonel-in-chief of, and nor do the other members of the royal family. But they have a strong link with each of them, and they frequently visit. They come to get to know the families and the soldiers and sailors and airmen in the different units. So it's a strong and important connection.
And so many members of the royal family have actually served in the military in recent decades. Indeed, the Queen, she served and helped during the Second World War, didn't she?
She did. She served in the Auxiliary Territorial Service of the Army during the war, and her father indeed served in the Royal Navy in the First World War and won a medal for commanding a gun turret during the Battle of Jutland, which we just passed the anniversary. And of course, Prince Andrew served in the Falklands. Prince Harry served in Afghanistan. It's a long-standing tradition, and the Queen's husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, served also in the Royal Navy and held very, very significant command positions during the Second World War and afterwards.
And how much does it mean to serving members of the armed forces across the three services to have that connection, when they're being asked to put their lives on the line for Queen and country? How strong is that bond, that respect?
Well, I think it's a kind of a link that could not be replaced, I don't think, by the traditional link between members of the armed forces and a political head of state. For example, like the Commander-in-Chief of the US, there is really in the armed forces pretty much no division among members of the armed forces who come from all sorts of backgrounds, from the nobility in effect down to people from council estates, and they all, with very, very few exceptions in my experience, they all have immense respect for the Queen and consider the Queen to be the person that they're serving. And if they're asked to put their life on the line, and some frequently are and some lose their lives, they're doing so because they're under the command of the Queen. Now, of course, the main motivation probably is not that. It's defending their country, defending their families, and fighting for the friends on their left and right. But it is a very important link and a very important unifying factor. It's a great reminder. I suspect over this weekend we sort of haven't perhaps heard enough of that, although obviously the trooping the colour was remarkable. And if you bring that to the present day, you wrote an article just the other day, Richard, in I think it was the Telegraph, that actually with the potential food shortage because of restrictions on exporting grain out of Ukraine, you said that actually we should use some of our armed forces, the Navy, to escort grain ships out of Ukraine, and that sort of brings it into sharp focus, doesn't it? Yeah, it does, and I think that's something that we should certainly be planning to do or considering doing, along with other allies, to escort and to provide cover for grain ships leaving Ukrainian ports to feed the world effectively. It's a huge humanitarian crisis beyond the war itself that's developing globally. I think the prospect, if that happens, the prospect of President Putin carrying out an attack against, say, Royal Naval ships in international waters, escorting grain cargoes, is very, very low. But it is a danger. It's a threat that exists. And if we do that, we will be asking members of our Royal Navy and probably the Royal Air Force as well to put themselves into immense danger.
And have we actually got the ships and the available aircraft in order to provide that protection, that support, that escort?
We do have, and I think we wouldn't be in the business of doing it alone anyway. I think we would make a major contribution. I think we could potentially lead that effort and certainly motivate others to join it. But we'd be looking at other navies like the US Navy and navies from other NATO countries like France and potentially from Turkey, Romania and so on. Romania and Turkey, of course, have naval fleets in the Black Sea itself, so already positioned there, and would provide important elements of that. It's also possible, I think, that we could encourage countries like Egypt, which rely very, very heavily on Ukrainian grain, to provide also a naval contingent for that task force if it's launched. Because
this is a very real crisis, isn't it, in terms of the huge quantity of grain that is essentially sort of beginning to clog up their warehouses, the storage, and if they can't empty the warehouses, then they've got nowhere to put this year's harvest, and then have they got the confidence to plant next year's?
Exactly, and it not only sees this situation you've described, not only sees potentially millions of people suffering from immense hunger and possibly starvation, and very likely starvation, but it also creates a political crisis because many of the countries that receive Ukrainian grain are in the Middle East and North Africa, unstable regions. And in the past, we've seen, food shortages contribute to triggering deep unrest, including, the rise of terrorist organizations like the Islamic State. And, for example, the Arab Spring itself, which caused immense violence, was partly prompted by a steep increase in food prices.
And how seriously is it currently being discussed, sort of behind closed doors, this idea of providing protection in order to get the grain out of Ukraine?
Well, I think navies around the world, including the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force as well, are planning for it. And obviously it's not something they would do on their own initiative. Sure. It's something that if government decided they should do it, then they would, and they must be ready to do so. So there are contingency plans being drawn up.
And moving on to the sort of the progress of the war itself, which understandably slips further and further back in the newspapers. We're well over 100 days now since the original invasion. It appears that Russia the Russian military to a degree have got their act together a bit more than initially in the battle for some of the cities in the east. What's your sense of what's really going on, for example, at Severodonetsk and things? Sort of conflicting stories inevitably coming out of there as to whether they've taken sort of 70% of it, or whether Ukrainians are succeeding in a fight back. What's your understanding of the latest position?
Well, in the beginning, I think Putin was very much chancing his arm in expecting to just invade the country and it would surrender, the government would collapse, he would take control of the country or most of it. That didn't work in the face of enormous Ukrainian resistance, very courageous resistance by the Ukrainians. But then he reduced his immediate objectives, and I say immediate advisedly because these are not his final objectives, by concentrating forces in the east and the south. He made enormous progress in the south, and at a very early stage, taking most of the Ukrainian coast, not all of it, and is now fighting extremely hard in the east, in the Donbass region. And I believe that the Russians have the upper hand there and will continue to have the upper hand. We've heard from the Ukrainians that yesterday they claim to have retaken parts of Severodonetsk. But that's obviously countered by the Russians, who are saying they're continuing to make good progress there. We don't really know unless we're on the ground. We don't really have good, reliable information. But I think that's exactly what's happening, that the Russians are making progress and will continue to do so.
And have you any sort of, what's your view? How does this end, or are we into an inevitable long war of attrition of months or, heaven forbid, years? Given that, in a sense, the price of being seen to lose for Putin is so great.
I think we're in for years of conflict, but I do believe there are two probably immediate possibilities. The first is that Putin takes the whole of Donbass and a large part of eastern Ukraine, and he's already got part of the south, and establishes corridor from the Crimea into Russia. And he then decides that his army is no longer capable of continuing to attack, for example, in the south, to take the whole of the coast, and decides to call for peace. He says, you know, we're a peaceful country. We've got rid of the Nazis. We've protected the Russian speakers in the east, and now we want peace, and that peace will be on our terms. We will hold on to the territory we've taken. I think that at that point, European countries in particular will do everything they can to pressure.
Put pressure on the Ukrainians to accept that. Well, time will tell. Richard, we will no doubt be talking again on that. Thank you so much, Colonel Richard Kemp, former commander of the British forces in Afghanistan, with his thoughts on military links, but also the latest in Ukraine. Coming up in the second hour, we're going to be talking about energy prices. Stay with us, give us a call, you know the number. You're listening to the home of common sense. It's Tice Talk, here at Talk TV.
On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 11.
Good morning, I'm Zora Suleiman. Preparations are underway for a parade and a pageant that'll bring the Platinum Jubilee celebrations to a close today. Around 10,000 people, including 6,000 performers, will be involved in staging a nearly 2-mile-long carnival procession in the capital. Well, our royal correspondent, Rupert Bell, says the weekend has succeeded in bringing the country together.
That it's not just a London affair. It is something that is part of the United Kingdom, and not everyone's going to be a monarchist, and I get it, but it actually, what it is a chance to bring people together, and it is the link. It is the lynch. It cements us all.
Well, last night, 22,000 people attended a special star-studded concert outside Buckingham Palace. It featured a number of artists, including Diana Ross, George Ezra and Queen. There was also a surprise sketch with Paddington Bear, who joined the monarch, who revealed she had a marmalade sandwich inside her handbag. Well, more than 30 members of the royal family attended, including Prince George and Princess Charlotte, while Prince Charles and William took to the stage to pay tribute to Her Majesty. In other news, missiles have hit the Ukrainian capital Kyiv after a period of relative calm in the city. Mayor Vitaly Klitschko says there's been no deaths reported so far. It comes as the UK Ministry of Defence says counterattacks by Ukraine have blunted Russian momentum in the city of Severodonetsk. The governor of the Luhansk region has suggested the city is now split in half between Ukrainian and Russian forces. The Met Police has referred itself to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. It's after officers were called to Chelsea Bridge in southwest London following reports of a man armed with a screwdriver. He was challenged and then tasered, but fell into the River Thames. He's now in a critical condition. And it's believed Boris Johnson could face a vote of no confidence as soon as this week. Dozens of Conservative MPs have publicly called on the Prime Minister to resign. It's after the Sue Gray report strongly criticised his role in the Partygate scandal. And England manager Gareth Southgate has criticised Hungary fans for booing his players taking the knee ahead of a Nations League defeat in Hungary. The crowd of mostly children watched the match despite UEFA ordering that the game be played behind closed doors.
That felt like inherited thinking to me, and what I would say is I hear that still in our stadiums as well. So that's why we do it. That's why we continue to take that stand.
That's all for now. We'll be back in half an hour.
My show is called The Independent Republic of Mike Graham because it's independent and I'm Mike Graham. But inside of that, it's all about you. It's all about the people that call into the show. It's all about what you care about because we know what ordinary people want to know.
Welcome back to Tice Talk. We are into the second hour of my 3-hour show. Lots of messages coming in, lots supportive of Prince Charles taking over from the Queen, but some actually also thinking that it should pass straight on to Prince William. Some people enjoying the show, but I think Ben in Morecambe may not be. He says, Richard, I'm no Republican, but after listening to you this morning, I'm beginning to think that I could be persuaded. There we go. You can't please everybody. But keep those messages coming in. Some of them are very funny. What you've been up to this Jubilee weekend. And we've got one here from, not quite sure who it is, I think it may be Bocker, who says, here's a crazy idea, Richard. I don't know if it'll work, but instead of relying on Ukraine grain, how about growing our own grain and food? Madness, I know. Then he goes on to say, and maybe use our own shale gas whilst we're at it. World's gone mad. Well, to a degree, you're right. We're not growing enough of our own food. Back in the 1980s, for example, we used to produce about 80% of what we consume here in the UK. That figure now is, I think I'm right in saying, well below 60%. So we do need to grow more of our own food. But in reality, most of the grain from Ukraine actually goes to feed people in Africa, as I understand. I'm not sure that very much, if any, comes here in the UK. But your point at the end of that message is absolutely crucial, and I've talked about it a lot, about using our own gas as opposed to importing gas. And that sort of leads me into what I want to talk about now, which of course is the cost of energy, the price crisis that we have got. And, you know, in a sense, where are energy prices going from here? Many in the government seem to think, I think rather optimistically, or possibly naively, they seem to think that it's a temporary hike and that it'll go back to previous levels. I'm much more concerned that actually they could go even higher still, particularly if, as Richard Kemp said there just before the break, particularly if this war goes on not for weeks or months but for years in Ukraine, then I can't see any reason why the gas price would come down. But I'm delighted to be joined now by Andrew Montford, who is the Deputy Director of Net Zero Watch, for his thoughts on that, because he's studying the energy markets very closely. Andrew, a very good morning. Thanks for joining us here on Tice Talk this morning.
Morning, Richard.
We all know where prices currently are. There's suggestions, pretty strong suggestions, that the energy price cap is going to be lifted up to £2,800 in October, and that's why the Chancellor had to rush out his statement. What are your thoughts on the latest position, where we are, gas prices and electricity prices, and indeed where they might go, given everything that's going on, all the various factors, the dynamics that drive energy prices?
So the great unknown, as you suggested, is what happens in the Ukraine war. Assuming that things are not back to normal vis-a-vis Russian gas by the winter, then we can expect prices to remain very high. In fact, they've fallen away over the summer simply because we don't need so much gas over the summer, I beg your pardon, when demand is much lower. But obviously, demand will come back again once the cold weather sets in, and then we're expecting prices to be very, very high again. It's perhaps worth saying, though, that even if the war does come to an end and things do return to normal, people shouldn't be expecting their energy prices to head onto a downward trajectory. There'll be a correction, at which point they'll all start going back onto the steady upward rise that we've seen for the last 20 years. People have to remember that the electricity prices in particular, were really quite high before the war started. And they'd been rising essentially since 2002, when the renewables obligation was put in. As we get more and more renewables put on the system, electricity prices are forced up because essentially all the gas-fired power stations which set market prices are made very inefficient. So that is an ongoing process that the government is essentially pushing quite hard for it to continue. They are saying they're going to put more and more wind on the system, which can only mean one thing. It can only mean higher and higher electricity prices.
This, I think, is the point that many in government and others don't seem to grasp, is that the huge subsidy cost, which of course is index-linked, of the renewables is driving the electricity price to a significant degree. And if you have more renewables, more offshore, then that's going to require ever more subsidies, driving the price ever higher, isn't it?
That's right. Now, people see and talk a lot about the subsidy cost. But of course, this is only one aspect of what households are being hit with. So as well as all the direct levies that are put on bills, which is where the subsidies essentially hit you, there are all the other things that government does that pushes your bills up. So, for example, having all those renewables on the system means we need to spend billions of pounds every year trying to fix the problems that causes in terms of intermittency, in terms of grid reliability. There's huge spending programs, billions and billions of pounds, that are hitting you instead of through your bills, they're hitting you through your taxes. So there's things like subsidising electric vehicles, subsidising installation of charging points for electric vehicles. There's now a whole new programme for subsidising heat pumps installations in homes. So that's another cost, which is probably as much again as the direct levies on your bills. So that's two hits. But there's actually a third, fourth, and a third hit and a fourth hit as well. So there are essentially the greenery and the preventing exploitation of shale gas and our own gas resources will drive up gas prices. So that hits you directly through your gas bill. And it also drives up the cost of electricity because electricity prices are a function of gas prices. That's another one. And then finally, there's the inefficiency that I've talked about this briefly before. Having all those wind farms on the grid makes all the gas-fired power stations very inefficient because they only get to run into occasionally, and nobody replaces them. They're quite old and inefficient, so nobody installs new ones. So there's a hit there. So the cost that people talk about all the time, the sort of the hundreds of pounds that the direct levies are costing you, are really only the tip of the iceberg. Underneath, there's not just hundreds of pounds more, there's thousands of pounds more. It may be as much as £2,000 or £3,000 per household that this is costing us.
Which at the moment is going, I guess, through the government's balance sheet in general taxation, as opposed to directly on our bills. Just whilst we've been talking, I've had an interesting message come in, Andrew, interested on your thoughts of this text message. This week, Janet Yellen stated that energy prices are set by global markets and more domestic production won't change that. Do you agree we should break that link and supply consumers at cost plus margin? This is the point I've been raising, because many MPs use that line when we talk about shale gas. But the simple evidence is, in America, where they produce using shale gas extraction, they produce their gas domestically and use it domestically, guess what? Their gas prices are a fraction of ours, literally a fraction.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of an unknown, really, what the effect of, if we do manage to exploit shale gas here, what will the effect be on prices? We are connected to mainland Europe by gas pipelines. The capacity of those pipelines is limited. So if we did produce here, the question is how much of it would just sort of disappear off to Europe. Now, the thing we're seeing at the moment is that we're having huge quantities of liquefied natural gas delivered from the States by ship, and it's turned back into gas here. But in fact, the continental Europeans aren't able to take it because they don't have the pipeline capacity to get it to where it's needed. So consequently, gas prices in the UK have fallen away quite quickly over the summer, whereas they're remaining really quite high in continental Europe. So my gut feeling is if we did exploit shale gas here, we would see lower prices.
And of course, you can create long-term supply contracts between the energy companies, the electricity companies, and the shale gas producers, sometimes government-backed, so that essentially the shale gas companies, that they've got a guaranteed fixed-price contract over the long term, and that way you are actually guaranteeing the price and keeping it domestic.
Yeah. Now, you see, there's a problem there because whether you get to burn gas or not depends on the weather. If the wind's blowing, then you won't be using it. And if it's not blowing, then you will. Now, the problem with therefore taking a long-term supply contract is, well, essentially you can't, because you don't know what the weather's going to be day to day. This is one of the reasons gas prices and electricity prices are so high in the UK, is because nobody knows whether we're going to need it or not, so can't go into.
But my point would be that if we've got our own domestic shale gas, which is guaranteed, and therefore you can guarantee the electricity that you're generating from gas, then actually you can reduce your reliance on the vulnerable wind turbines, as you say, because you don't know.
You would have to change the rules essentially to stop the wind power getting priority
but in a sense,
on the grid.
That I think is the way forward to drive prices down. We're using our own energy, which, by the way, we actually save CO2 by using our own domestic gas than shipping it in LNG ships, and that way you've got much more predictability of supply and cost, haven't you?
Yeah, I think that's right. We have put forward a plan. We at Net Zero Watch have put forward a plan for trying to get prices down. And the reality is the only way you can do it is to reduce the price of electricity from gas-fired turbines, and that means essentially pushing renewables off the grid, because they are causing the problem, if you like. The structural problem is coming from renewables. There is an immediate crisis coming from the war in Ukraine, but we have a structural problem as well, and we need to deal with that if we're ever going to get ourselves out of this crisis.
I think that's right, Andrew. Thank you so much for your thoughts. My concern is the more renewables that this government pushes down our throats, as Andrew says, structurally, gradually, incrementally, the costs are going to go ever higher. That was Andrew Montford, the Deputy Director of Net Zero Watch, with his thoughts about the true cost of the renewables impacting on our electricity prices. And at the moment, with that, they're going to continue to go up and up. We're going to be taking a break shortly, and then we'll be taking your calls. 0344 499 1000. Lots of messages coming in here. Mike, he says, Boris told us of these changes to the price caps before Russia invaded Ukraine. So in a sense, it can't be blamed for everything. And I think that is absolutely right. A lot of these price increases were baked in before the invasion of Ukraine. Mick says here, Richard, Putin will not be stopped whilst countries like the duplicitous French engage in their self-interest. Keep those messages coming in. Lots of different thoughts, lots of different views on that. Pablo says the stock market's turned against overhyped clean tech companies, and it's about time. What are your thoughts on that? You know the number. Stay with us. It's Tice Talk here on Talk TV. Welcome back to Tice Talk here on Talk TV. We are well into the second hour of my show. Lots of messages and calls coming in. We've obviously been talking about the Jubilee celebrations. I want to hear from you with your thoughts. What have you been up to? Have you enjoyed a big street party? Are you going to one this afternoon? Apparently 10 million people are going to be at celebrations and street parties, village events, town events, city events this afternoon. Let's hope the weather gets better and better. A couple of good messages coming in. One from Pete says, referring to the previous caller earlier, Lenny, he says, I think Lenny's wrong. There's a massive difference between Prince Charles and Andrew, and if you like it or not, the line of succession won't change. I think Pete's right. I agree. I think there is a massive difference between Prince Charles, who has worked so incredibly hard over the decades, and Prince Andrew, who has let himself and the royal family down. But there we are. Meanwhile, Andy says, and this is an interesting one, a separate topic. It's funny, they can get military equipment as much as they want into Ukraine, but they also have, and they can also have Boris walking down the street with the Ukrainian president, but they can't get grain out. You can fool some of the people some of the time, but not all of the time. Interesting thoughts from Andy. I know, actually, it's not as easy as that, just getting the military equipment in from people that I've spoken to, but it is a vital part of the Ukrainian defence. Anyway, we're going to take some calls now and hear what people have, their thoughts. Phil is in Hertfordshire. Morning, Phil. How are you feeling? What are you up to for these for this long weekend?
Good morning, Richard. Yeah, well, I've actually been fishing. So
have you?
So I've been sitting around. I have indeed. Yeah, I've been sitting by a lake, relaxing, and away from it all.
Ah, okay. And so, have you had the Union flag sort of hanging off the fishing rod, or as part of your kit, or have you just been focusing on, you know, sustainability and catching your own fish?
Well, yeah, sustainability is the thing. I've had my Union Jack mug. I've had my tea with my Union Jack mug.
Splendid.
So I have been patriotic. Yeah. Sorry, Richard, go ahead.
No, go ahead. What would you like to say?
Yeah, a couple of things, Richard. I heat my home with heating oil. Like there's tens of thousands of rural people in the country. Now, we've had a lot of talk from the grants for electric and gas. What about the heating oil? Because obviously that's going to have a knock-on effect, and that's going to, well, I have noticed the prices rising. So has our lovely Chancellor given any allowances for that or even thought about it?
Well, that's a very good point, actually, because, of course, the oil price has gone to some, you know, very, very high levels. And indeed, I think remains above $100 a barrel. And, you know, there is always a link between oil prices and gas prices. When one rises, the other does too. And no, I think it's an important point. But as I recall, his essentially sort of what he gave away to people was actually focused on who you are rather than what fuel you are using, you know, rather than oil, gas or electricity. You know, it's whether or not, for example, you're on out-of-work benefits, in-work benefits, or whether you're a pensioner or disabled. And
sure,
as well as every household, regardless, gets that base, in a sense, gift. Although, of course, it's not a gift because it's our money. But that base discount of £400 per household.
Well, I run a heating company, and part of our job spec is we do look after a lot of local authority rural properties. And I can tell you there's a lot of people that will fall into that category that have heating oil. So I'm hoping they haven't been overlooked.
Well, I hope so too, of course, because, you know, so much of this, in my view, is totally self-inflicted by the government. But as I say, my understanding is every household, regardless of what type of heating fuel you use, gets that £400 discount direct on their energy bills. But it's a good point. If you're ordering oil direct from, you know, from an oil company, which I guess is how you do it to fill your tank, how do you get that discount passed to you? Is a good question. Well, or maybe it comes through your but you obviously got electricity bills from a energy company as well.
Yes, we have there will be electricity bills as well, but I can't see how they can subsidise your heating oil against your electric, because it's not metered. You see, basically what you do, you buy per litre how much you want, but you don't have a meter. So there's no meter saying how much you'll use over a certain period of time.
It's a great question.
It's an interesting one.
It's a great question, Phil. We need to, well, if you can ask your supplier, let us know, then we can help others answer it. Phil, thank you very much for that question, your thoughts. Enjoy your fishing, if that's where you're back to with your Union flag mug. Thank you for that, Phil. We're going to head down to East Sussex now, where Amanda is there waiting patiently. Good morning, Amanda. How are you enjoying your Jubilee long weekend celebrations?
Morning, Richard. It's nice to speak to you again. Okay, well, unfortunately, I'm not really in the party sort of mindset that everyone else is in, I think. And the reason I say that is because during the vaccine rollout, if you remember last year, the Queen basically intervened by making a statement saying that it was very selfish for people not to take the jab. And I was very disappointed with her making that comment, because she's supposed to remain neutral when it comes to, you know, political matters or anything that's a little bit sort of sensitive in that way. I didn't agree with her comments last year.
Has that made you did that upset you so much that you haven't been able to enjoy the weekend and sort of the 70 years of service that she's given the country?
I mean, I certainly am very grateful for the Queen, and I was, you know, born in this country. I'm very proud to be British. But I'm going to be honest with you, Richard, I find it all very difficult to feel celebratory, because I've been looking into the COVID vaccine for the last 2 years, mostly because I lost my father at the beginning of the pandemic, before it was even announced. And I never took the vaccine myself because I didn't trust from the get-go what we were being told.
That was the point, was that everybody, you know, made their own decision, and I fully support that you know, people should. I didn't support mandatory vaccines. I can't actually remember the exact wording that Her Majesty the Queen used.
She said it was selfish.
Whether it was taken in, whether it was properly reported or not. But fundamentally, Amanda, you made your choice. Millions of others made their choices and different choices, and I think we should all respect that. You know, it's a very individual choice. But what I'm hoping is this weekend is actually about sort of bringing people together, unifying, and just giving thanks really for the Queen's service as we look forward, and we look forward to sort of turning points really in the country.
I agree with you there, Richard. Absolutely, it's very important to honour the Queen's service to this country. I've got absolutely no argument with that whatsoever. All I'm saying is that I personally feel quite sad actually this weekend, because I look around the world now and I look at how many people, and it's fact, because the truth is now coming out. It can't be hidden any longer from the public. The vaccine deaths and the damage from these vaccines to some people.
There's lots being looked at, and we will learn lots of it, Amanda. That is for sure. Thank you. That was Amanda in East Sussex with her thoughts about the weekend. But give us a call with your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Are you enjoying it? What are you up to? Let us know. You're listening to Tice Talk here at Talk TV.
I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I'm a Talk TV presenter. The last tweet that I really liked was a guy on a petrol forecourt who tweeted, "I've just seen a guy on pump 3 fill up with £10 worth of petrol. Where's he driving to? Pump 4? 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, never miss a moment with Talk TV."
This is Talk TV News.
Good morning, I'm Zora Suleiman. It's the final day of Platinum Jubilee celebrations, which are expected to end on a high come rain or shine. A thunderstorm warning is in place for England and Wales, but it's hoped that won't stop crowds turning out for a parade and pageant in London later. Around 10,000 people, including 6,000 performers, will be involved in staging a nearly 2-mile-long carnival procession. Our royal correspondent, Rupert Bell, says the weekend has succeeded in bringing the country together.
And it's got to be seen that it's not just a London affair. It is something that is part of the United Kingdom, and not everyone's going to be a monarchist, and I get it, but it actually, what it is a chance to bring people together, and it is the link. It is the lynch. That cements us all.
Missiles have hit the Ukrainian capital Kyiv after a period of relative calm in the city. Mayor Vitaly Klitschko says there's been no deaths reported so far. It comes as the UK Ministry of Defence says counterattacks by Ukraine have blunted Russian momentum in the city of Severodonetsk. There have been a further 2 mass shootings in the US this weekend, one at a shopping mall in Arizona, which left a 14-year-old girl dead and 8 injured. The second shooting in Philadelphia killed 3 people and injured 11 others. Police say there were several shooters firing into crowds. And Transport Secretary Grant Shapps has told us that he doesn't believe there'll be a confidence vote in the Prime Minister this week. Dozens of Conservative MPs have publicly called on the Prime Minister to resign. It's after the Sue Gray report strongly criticised his role in the Partygate scandal. Well, that's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Welcome back to Tice Talk. We're well into the middle of the second hour here on Talk TV. Looking outside the window, it's barely lifting at all. I'm just hoping and praying that it does lift for everybody's celebrations this afternoon. 10 million people at street events up and down the country celebrating, partying the last day of this huge 4-day celebration. Well, we're doing a bit of chatting and celebrating here in the studio, and I'm delighted on my regular once-a-month talk gear to talk about the motoring issues and the cost of motoring that also affect our cost of living. And I'm joined by Howard Cox, who's the co-founder of the Fair Fuel UK campaign. Howard, a very good morning. Thanks for joining us. So, have you been partying this weekend? My last caller was actually rather a bit sort of grumpy about the weekend, but I'm hoping maybe you've been partying. I had another caller he's been fishing all weekend.
Well, I'm sorry, I've enjoyed it. It's been fantastic. I'm a bit of I'm a queenist, if that's the right way, royalist.
Okay, you're a queenist, interesting.
Yes, that's an interesting way of putting it, I know. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. I enjoyed the concert last night, except for when the green agenda was brought up and rammed down our throats, but that's another matter.
Yes, indeed, yes, that was Prince William, wasn't it? How did you enjoy Rod Stewart?
Yeah, I mean, well, he's about my age, I think. So, but he's a good lad. It was all good stuff.
It was all good
some are past their sell-by date a little bit, but it was a great evening. I mean, Diana Ross was phenomenal.
Phenomenal.
Absolutely. And so was Andre Bocelli. I mean,
yes,
I actually had a lump in my throat watching him sing that.
I mean, Nessun Dorma, it just always brings sort of spines to me. Yeah. It just hairs on my spine. Absolutely fantastic. So that's great. You've been celebrating the Jubilee weekend, and as have millions across the country. But I do want to talk about the cost of motoring, because obviously lots of people will have travelled to see family and friends elsewhere in the country, and we've got essentially record fuel prices, which of course must have impacted on people's decisions and ability, whether they go to one event, 2 events, one part of the family, another part of the family, or not. What are you hearing? Because you get letters every day, emails every day from people.
Yeah, what we're seeing, and we did a survey in the last couple of months, which are asking people, how is the impact of these record prices? Don't forget, every day's a record price. We get a record every day. They're just going up, up and up. What we're hearing from these people, the usual weekly shop to go to get food is now becoming a monthly shop. They're cutting back by that amount. We're seeing people that can't afford to get to medical appointments. People who are doing chemotherapy are writing to me saying, I can't get to see my thing because I can't afford to fill my car. And this is the issue that really makes me very angry, Richard, with our government. It's in their power to sort this out and solve the cost of living, because, as you know, every time anyone mentions the price of petrol or diesel, it's usually mentioned because inflation's gone up, because of pump prices have gone up. It always linked to the two, and everything we do in this studio, in your home, everywhere we look, it once arrived on a truck. And the Road Haulage Association members, 50 to 60% of their costs are fuel. And that can only impact on the cost of living.
So let's look in detail at the cost of fuel. At the moment, diesel, obviously, on the forecourt is sort of, give or take, 15, sometimes 20p per litre more expensive. Why is that, and what's going on? Because the wholesale price, you're saying, is reflecting a different picture.
Well, this is the problem. I mean, currently diesel's around about 183 and petrol's about 172. So we're looking at about 11p difference there. And yet the wholesale price of diesel only 3 days ago was 9p less than petrol. So if you put 9p and 11, that's 20p swing. Excuse me, please tell us this opaque pricing process is only known to a few people. We need to get on top of it. And that's why I'm working very hard with various backbench MPs to introduce Pump Watch. And it was only last weekend or the weekend before last, Boris stood up, because we put a lot of pressure on him, to say, please, we've got to get that 5p cut in duty passed on to drivers. Should be 6p with a 20% VAT on top of that. But no one's seen that.
So there's two aspects. So what do you think's happening? If the wholesale price of diesel is less than petrol, and yet the retail price on the forecourts is 11, 12p more than petrol, someone's taking a bunch of cash on the way through, aren't they?
That's further up the fuel supply chain. In fact, I've got the latest figures in terms of what is happening in terms of the retail margin. And this is important, Richard, because retailers get it in the neck from people saying, oh, the price of fuel, and they get shouted at and screamed at, and I get a lot of retailers blaming me for this. I'm not blaming retail forecourts. It's not their fault. They have contractual relationships with the big oil companies, whether they're either franchisees or contractual relationships with the oil companies. We're looking to, the date of this was the 1st of June. Today's the 5th. So because of the holiday thing, it's not updated. But only 3 or 4 days ago, the retail margin for petrol was minus 9p. They're losing 9p, the retailers.
Retailers are losing
9p, and diesel, they're losing 1 pence. So that's what we're at the moment. The retailers are not making any money out of this. They're being ripped off. And going back to your question, further up the fuel supply chain, Richard, someone is really coining it in.
Yeah, I mean, because it just doesn't compute. Something's not right there, without question. So, I mean, if the retailers are barely making... I mean, they must be making something. And obviously they make money on the margins of,
the shops and things like that.
In the shops and things. But they can't make nothing for very long.
No, you're absolutely right.
They're shut. So...
Well, I got a phone call from a retailer garage saying it would be better for him to get a tanker, drive down to the local Asda, fill up for the petrol there, and come back and sell it, because he would make more money doing that way. In other words, Asda are actually selling it for more than he can buy it, for less than he can buy it.
I mean, that's not right. Now, Pump Watch. Tell us about Pump Watch, because I know you have been working hard with certain MPs on that. How does it work, or how would it work, and why is it so vital at this time?
Well, I've submitted to Grant Shapps. I'm not sure why Grant Shapps involved. It should be the Treasury, in my opinion. But the combination of the two, I was asked by Robert Halfon, MP for Essex, the brilliant In Touch, and he's Mr Fairfield UK in Parliament, super guy. He had hoped to be on today, but he had to go to a Jubilee church ceremony. But between us, we put together an idea of actually a 2-stage process with Pump Watch. The first stage is very simple. Can we get all garages to sign up to, say, a kite mark that puts on every garage forecourt that simply says Pump Watch, and underneath it, we adhere to fair pricing when oil prices change, etc. And we are transparent, we're not ripping you off, basically. Obviously, it'd be better language than that, but that's what we're calling for. If they don't adhere to that, then we move to a full-blown Ofgem, Ofcom type body, which have legislative powers. The important thing about that is if we have the kite mark up there, at least the drivers will know that they're not being ripped off.
OK. And would that actually then, you see on the bills, how much is essentially is government tax, and then how much is the remainder?
Well, at the moment, it's only VAT, Rich, isn't it, we see on a receipt.
That's all you see?
Yeah, but I've campaigned many times for having all taxes to be displayed on receipts. And Peter Aldous, MP for Waveney, I think it is, he had a 10-minute rule bill and mentioned this approach. But again, this is why I'm angry with this. It is a big C Conservative government, but I don't see any Conservative policies.
No. Well, it's interesting you talk about that you're having to speak to Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, as opposed to the Treasury. To everyone, if you've, if your petrol station, your local filling up station, do you think they're doing a good job, or do you think they're ripping people off? Let us know. What's the difference with you? Or have you got any questions for Howard? He's willing and ready and able to take questions. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000, or send us a message, because we've got to pressurise these companies, all of those involved in the fuel chain, to be fair with consumers, because otherwise the pain is too great, the suffering is too great. And of course, the reality is, in that scenario, it's the least well off and the poorest, isn't it, who suffer the most.
It's small businesses and the haulage industry, logistics. Everything arrives on a truck. And that, when they have to put their prices up because of fuel costs, we all pay for it in inflation, and jobs. They can't invest in new drivers, HGV drivers. They can't invest in cleaner kit.
No, that's right. Well, we've got a tweet in here, which we'll come back to after the break, talking about the link to the exchange rate and the Bank of England. But anyway, keep those messages, or if you've got any questions for Howard, do give us a call, send us a tweet. You know the number. It is, of course, Tice Talk. It's Talk TV. Welcome back to Tice Talk. We're well into the second hour of my show, and I'm delighted that in the studio I've got Howard Cox, who is the co-founder of the Fair Fuel UK campaign. We're talking about the exorbitant fuel prices that's having such a massive impact on all of our lives, and of course a huge impact on small businesses, because the higher the cost of fuel, the less activity. And we've got this Jubilee weekend, and I fear that that actually people who might have wanted to travel to see friends and family, those on the lowest incomes that are most affected by high fuel prices, they would have had to cancel and miss out because of this government's policy.
Well, the average family diesel, for example, is well over £100 to fill up now. This time last year, it was about £55 to £60. £40 they've had to find. If they're earning a living, they have to find 60 quid to get that.
An extra 60 quid.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Howard. Now, we've got on the line a question for you, Howard, from Rosemary is calling. Good morning, Rosemary, from Maidstone. Hello. I'm hoping Rosemary's there.
Yes, I am.
Oh, well done, Rosemary. Hi there, Rosemary. Thanks very much for calling in. You've got a question, I think, for Howard on fuel prices.
Well, yes, I'm wondering whether it's part of the WEF or the World Government agenda, so-called, to collapse the West. I mean, is it happening in other countries? I know America's got a slight problem. What about Europe? What about, I don't know, Australia and all the other countries? Is this happening overall throughout the world?
Great question, Howard.
It's a superb question, and it's very intuitive to ask it. The important thing to understand is we're the only country in the world that prices diesel more than petrol, for example. Most of the other European countries, they price diesel less than petrol because they recognise that diesel is the commercial heartbeat of any economy. Those are the sorts of things we don't understand, and this government here doesn't seem to understand that. In answer to your question about what is happening in Europe, they are suffering too, but not as bad as we are. We are still got the highest priced diesel at 183.84. There's some things like Hong Kong is £2.15, and Monaco's 1.97. But I think the clues in the names are they're very rich nations.
We've got the highest taxes, is that right?
Yes, we have. It did come down, don't forget, by 5p.
Yes.
So we're now 46% to 47% of what goes into the tank is actually taxed, but it's still a huge whack on an essential resource.
And Rosemary, if you're a driver, have you had to restrict or reduce your driving because of the cost of fuel now?
I am careful where I go now. Yes, I do still drive, even though I'm pretty ancient, but I need to be able to drive because, you know, I can't walk terribly far at the moment. But it's so... I mean, why are we still paying VAT on it? We're out of the EU.
Honestly, that's a fantastic question, and I know Maidstone well. I live just down the road in Cranbrook, so I'm not far from you.
I know...
Yes, and the thing is about this VAT, there's two things wrong with it. The government, it is immoral that they're wallowing in a shed load of extra VAT because of these high prices. But even more immoral is the VAT is on the fuel duty as well. It's a double taxation. How are they allowed to get away with that? And so I'm going to continue fighting against these things, and I've got a lot of backbench MP support. But unfortunately, the government are going through this with such myopia, tunnel blindness, of actually thinking that they've got too much debt, they can't give us more money to spend, give us consumer spending. By cutting fuel duty significantly would actually put more money in all our pockets, and we'd spend it.
And Rosemary, are lots of your friends also having to cut back on their travel to see family and friends?
I don't really know. I'm assuming, yes, I think they are actually. But I'm careful about where I'm going now because of the fuel. I do tend to try and keep a car full of fuel.
Okay. Yes.
Just in case, because if my son or one of them should need it desperately to get to work, there is a spare car.
Yes. Got it. Rosemary, thank you so much for calling with that great question about worldwide fuel prices. And it is it's a really important thing. But I think, Howard, that actually the government should be cutting tax. We're staring a recession in the face, and the way to grow an economy is to cut taxes. And if you cut the tax on fuel duty, and in my view we should be looking at about 20p a litre, then that makes a significant difference. That's going to generate economic activity, and therefore that's going to, particularly for businesses, the commercial hub that you mentioned.
Well, you say 20p. If we cut it by 20p, that would only bring us back to close to the average in Europe in terms of taxation. That's the irony of all of this. And a 20p cut would be fantastic, because as I said just now, the 5p cut back in the spring statement, no one's noticed that, have they? Even the RAC said only 2p has been passed on.
If they've been passed it on. Howard, we've got another caller from West Sussex. From Keith, who is on the line. Morning, Keith. Thanks for calling. Are you? Have you got a question for Howard? Hi there, Keith. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Fantastic. Thanks for calling. So, have you got a question for Howard on fuel prices and things?
I have, yes.
Go for it, Keith. Thank you.
Right.
The floor is yours, Keith. What's your question?
It goes.
We're just losing you, Keith. I think the way...
I'm on now.
Yeah, you're on air, Keith. Ask your question to Howard, please.
Yeah, hi. Why is nobody championing LPG?
It's absolutely a brilliant question. LPG is fantastic, and I'm a big fan of it. There's a few issues regarding LPG in terms of performance they're talking about, but you're right. Why they're not championing? Because it is actually a cleaner fuel, and it's cheaper, considerably cheaper, etc. But again, the government seem to be completely blind to any alternative fuel. They've got us on this track to drive electric vehicles, no matter what, how expensive they are. And I just think that all technologies should be looked at, and all types of fuels should be looked at, and LPG is one of the top on my list.
And Keith, do you have an LPG car?
I bought a 4x4 with LPG fitted, not knowing it had LPG, but the car has got LPG, and when it runs out of LPG, it automatically switches over to petrol.
Right.
Now, I can fill this up for because the average price, when you can find it, because it's getting more difficult to find.
That's a good point.
When you can find LPG, it ranges from 60 pence to 89 pence. Now, I fill my 4x4 up for about £50, and I get 230 miles for that 50 quid. Now it just knocks petrol out the way. And I must say, when it switches over automatically, because when the LPG runs out, it switches to petrol, I find no difference whatsoever.
That's good. That's interesting.
So in terms of miles per gallon, Keith,
yes.
What are you getting on LPG compared to petrol?
I can't really tell you that, because all I know is I fill it up and I get. Right. I fill it up, and then when it runs out, I've done 230 miles.
I think you'll find that there isn't much in the miles per gallon difference, but what the difference is the price you're paying for the fuel itself.
And so, is that because there's less tax on it?
Yes.
So why is the government... Oh, I guess that I've answered my own question. Why is the government making it harder to find it? Because there's less tax on it.
If we all started using LPG, I promise you they'd tax it.
And Keith, so is it much harder to find now, Keith?
It's becoming harder to find, because garages that advertise they're selling it, you get there, they either haven't got none, or they completely stopped using it. So that is the downside, is finding garages. Now, I go to Morrison's, which have an LPG tank, and their price is around about 78 pence.
And what's the petrol at Morrison's at the moment, do you know?
I say, what, 180?
Yeah,
170,
so you're looking at more than a pound difference.
So Howard, what's the tax on LPG?
I can't remember what's happened recently, but I think it's about 40% again of what you're paying.
Of that price.
Yeah.
But therefore it's significally less than the tax on petrol
and
diesel.
All this drumming on with electric cars, every car could be fitted with LPG. I think it will cost about £3,000 to convert a car from LPG to LPG and petrol. 3,000, and the savings on petrol in a year we pay for it.
Brilliant.
But they want to push the electric car while LPG is sitting there. The actual the fumes from it are less than petrol. The environment will be safe. It's just a much cheaper way of driving a car.
Okay, brilliant, Keith. Thank you so much for those thoughts. We've got lots of tweets coming in as we've been speaking. So. We've got a question here from Neil in Swansea, Howard. The government also raised company car tax on diesel 3% higher than petrol years ago. Why was that?
Because they can. There is no logic in anything. They penalise businesses so hard. My big call, Richard, and to all your viewers and listeners, is that come and wake up, government. You're sitting on something that can actually reduce the cost of living.
Yeah. Well, I think that's right. We've got another one here. What does Howard think about the imbecilic removal of the tax advantage for red diesel, which is so important to farmers and the construction industry? That's from John.
Well, I spoke, I think, on the last show about the red diesel issue, and fundamentally, again, the government are simply... it's the word fossil fuel is the problem, and they've got this green agenda. They just want to attack everything. They're anti-driver, and there are three things they need to do. One is cut fuel duty, which, Richard, I totally support your 20 pence. You've got my backing totally and all our supporters. Then we need to put pump watch on to make sure we control the opportunistic profiteering so that it's transparent and fair to everyone. And the third thing is we need a Competition and Markets Authority inquiry to actually, where is this money going?
Well, that's right. And if you did do that 20p cut, the cost to the Treasury, theoretically, they will say, and then we'll come up with the alternative, they will say what? Well, that's going to cost me how much?
Well, a 10p is around about 6 billion, so you're looking at about 12 billion, 13 billion for a 20p cut. But what would that do to the economy?
That's the point. So it's the increase in activity for small businesses, for people travelling and things. But of course the Green lobby will say, oh, isn't it brilliant? People are driving less miles. That's good for the environment.
Well, this is the problem again, isn't it? And I'm afraid the advisors, all the SPADs, the special advisors in Westminster, they are totally and utterly entrenched in green policy. And the government are just listening to them and no one else. And I would like to call here, through your good auspices of your show, to Boris, please can you sit down with me? I represent 1.7 million supporters and potentially 37 million drivers, all voters. Please can we talk about how much pain you are causing for drivers?
Yeah, that's right. Well, there's a message here, an angry one from Dave, he said, Howard, it's all very well spouting off, but can't you get your members to take direct action like the previous fuel protest instead of talking?
I'm getting close to it, my good friend. I've always been anti that because, like Extinction Rebellion and like the Insulate Britain people, they just basically alienate the people, the very people they want on their side. The 2000, truck protests when we had the blockades in London, I know that very well, and it did have an impact. You're right. I am getting closer to much more.
Well, that's right. I mean, we have to stay within the law, of course.
Exactly.
But it's about what's doing what is effective. Thanks for that. Thanks for all those messages. And thanks to you, Howard, for coming in and talking about this. We will keep talking about it every week, every month, because it is so important. And I want your thoughts, your views on this. Tweet us, text us, call us. You know the number, 0344 499 1000. It's Tice Talk. It's Talk TV.
On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 12.
Good afternoon, I'm Zora Suleiman. It's the final day of Platinum Jubilee celebrations, where it's expected to end on a high come rain or shine. A thunderstorm warning is in place for England and Wales, but it's hoped that that won't stop the crowds turning out for a parade and pageant in London later. Around 10,000 people, including 6,000 performers, will be involved in staging a nearly 2-mile-long carnival procession. Our royal correspondent, Rupert Bell, says the weekend has succeeded in bringing the country together.
And it's got to be seen that it's not just a London affair. It is something that is part of the United Kingdom, and not everyone's going to be a monarchist, and I get it, but it actually, what it is a chance to bring people together, and it is the link. It is the lynch. That cements us all.
Secretary has insisted that the Prime Minister would win a vote of no confidence. Speculation is growing that Boris Johnson will face a vote this week after dozens of his own MPs called for him to resign. But Grant Shapps says he doesn't think the numbers are there.
I do wish, as media could sort of lift their eyes above what one MP says, or even, as you say, what 30 MPs say. If it's going to happen, it happens. I don't think it's about it. We'll see. And I assume if it doesn't happen, we can come back and have a sensible discussion about all the things that actually matter to people.
Missiles have hit the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, after a period of relative calm in the city. Mayor Vitaly Klitschko says there's been no deaths reported so far. It comes as the UK Ministry of Defence says counterattacks by Ukraine have blunted Russian momentum in the city of Severodonetsk. There have been a further 2 mass shootings in the US this weekend, one at a shopping mall in Arizona, which left a 14-year-old girl dead and 8 injured. The second shooting in Philadelphia killed 3 people and injured 11 others. Police say there were several shooters firing into crowds. And the Met Police has referred itself to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. It's after officers were called to Chelsea Bridge in southwest London following reports of a man armed with a screwdriver. He was challenged and then tasered but fell into the River Thames. He's now in a critical condition. Well, those are the latest news headlines. Still to come, your Talk Sport update. But first, your weather.
Times Sport sponsors Talk TV weather.
A change in the weather is on the way for England and Wales. However, Scotland will see the best of the weather with lots of sunny spells. The same is also forecast for Northern Ireland, although they will see some patchy cloud too. Now, on to the weather warnings, and we have a yellow weather warning for thunderstorms, which is in place between lunchtime and midnight. The warning is for parts of the north of England, Yorkshire and Humber, central England, the east of England, Wales, and also the south and southeast of England. In those areas, we can expect to see heavy showers and thunderstorms, which may cause travel disruption and lead to flooding in a few places. So to recap, sunshine for Scotland and Northern Ireland and thunderstorms for much of England and Wales.
Times Earth sponsors Talk TV weather.
Again, well, England's cricketers are just 10 runs away from victory against New Zealand at Lord's. Joe Root and Ben Foakes are at the crease, with Root reaching a century and in the process scoring a remarkable 10,000 Test career runs, becoming the joint fastest to reach that milestone. Well, questions are being raised over the future of Gareth Bale ahead of Wales's match with Ukraine this evening. The winner qualifies for the World Cup, but there's concerns Bale could call time on his career should Wales suffer defeat. There will be live updates on the match on Talk Sport this evening. And England manager Gareth Southgate has criticised Hungary fans for booing his players taking the knee ahead of Nations League defeat in Hungary. The crowd of mostly children watched the match despite UEFA ordering that the game be played behind closed doors. Well, that's all for now. I'll be back with more in half an hour.
Let me tell you about Piers Morgan. He's brilliant, he's entertaining, he's absolutely on the money when it comes to identifying the issues that you face. He's arguably the best journalist in Britain today.
And a very good afternoon to you. You're listening to Tice Talk this afternoon towards the end of the 4-day Jubilee weekend of celebrations. You're probably getting ready, or might already be, at a street party, a gathering, or waiting for the pageant in central London this afternoon. Meanwhile, that news, just on the news headlines there, England within 10 runs of winning the first test against New Zealand. It's been quite an extraordinary test. I was there on Thursday. Just wickets falling all over the place from both teams. We'll keep you informed on that. And we'll keep you informed also from Rupert Bell, should the news come through as to whether or not the Queen is attending the pageant on this historic weekend. And I'm just going to slightly change tack now. We talk about timelines, and this is an extraordinary weekend, these dates in early June, actually in history, and indeed in wartime history, because tomorrow, of course, is the 78th anniversary of D-Day, which was a turning point in the Second World War. And this issue of turning points is, I think, really significant. And when you're living, in a way, you don't know you're living in a potential turning point in history. There was another really important turning point 80 years ago yesterday, so this weekend, in the Second World War, which was also really significant in the Pacific, on the Battle of Midway. And there's a new book that's just been written called Silver Waterfall by Brendan Sims and Stephen McGregor. And I'm delighted now to be joined on the line from the east coast of the US by Stephen McGregor. Stephen, good morning to you, good afternoon to me. Thanks for joining us on Tice Talk. So you've just written this book on the Battle of Midway. Just give us some sort of key headlines to it, and talk about the fact that the US was the underdog in that battle, because then we can sort of see how that links to where we are now.
Thank you, Richard. It's nice to meet you. Yes, I'm in a slightly different time zone at the moment, but you could say my heart is in England, because that's where the rest of my family is, and I'll be back there shortly. So. Yes, the Battle of Midway, it was a turning point, and our book examines exactly how that victory, it was a victory for the United States and indeed the Allies in the Second World War, and a defeat for the Axis, for Japan and the Axis powers. And our book examines how exactly that moment came about. There have been many good books written about the Battle of Midway, but there is still more to be said, and we demonstrate how the battle was very much the result of skill, not luck. And it's also a migration story. So 3 of the key figures in the U.S. victory on the day, they are German Americans. They're descendants of Germans who come to the U.S. in the 19th century. And they make invaluable contributions to the battle. One of them, Ed Heinemann, designs the Dauntless plane, the Dauntless dive bomber. Another, Chester Nimitz, is the U.S. admiral who conceives the strategy that wins the Battle of Midway. And the third is Dusty Clice, the pilot, one of the pilots, who is so important in putting his ordnance at the right place on the right time in the battle.
And so you're talking there, and I think this is what's really relevant now, is, in a sense, what sort of boils down to individual contributions from specific people and tactics can make such a significant impact on a really major battle like that, that then becomes a turning point in history.
Yes, I completely agree. I think it's very important that we realize victory is achieved when soldiers, when airmen, when sailors, when they do what they are trained to do, when they act with initiative when they do the right thing. You know, this battle was very much a battle that was won. The Japanese Navy was very capable. In many respects, it was better than the American Navy. I'm not sure. There is a bit of an argument as to what extent the U.S. was an underdog. Certainly, in terms of the dive bomber, the U.S. had a better dive bomber. Although the Japanese, the HE D3A1, their dive bomber was very effective. The American dive bomber was better. It was a better plane. But the point is that on the day, pilots like Dusty Tice, they performed the mission that they had trained to do. And so it's very much a story of how ordinary, in this case, ordinary sailors, ordinary aviators, these men, they don't come from established families. They come from very humble backgrounds. Dusty Tice is from Coffeyville, Kansas. He's from flyover country, you might say, in the U.S. But he does what he is trained to do on the day of battle.
And I guess, if turning now to what we're sadly experiencing in Ukraine, again, you know, people assumed that Russia would sort of walk in and it would all be over within a very short period of time. But actually, we're seeing this with the Ukrainian military, Ukrainian soldiers on the ground, the bravery that they, and indeed civilians that have taken up uniform, and the impact that that's having on that battle.
Yes, I think that's a good point. So I myself, I was in the American Army. I was a paratrooper in a previous life. It feels like, yeah, it does. It feels very much like a previous life. But that's an experience where you do see, very much like with the war in Ukraine, that it is ordinary men and women that are making the difference there. And it has, I think, surprised the whole world that they are willing to pay whatever cost to resist this invasion.
Interesting. And I guess at the time of the Battle of Midway, they probably didn't know it was or perhaps they did know it was a sort of a turning point in the Pacific War.
Yeah, so this is somewhat of a contrast with naval battles. There's a historian, Cathal Nolan, who's written a very long work, The Allura Battle, which argues that there are no true decisive moments in war, that all wars are decided by attrition. But what's interesting about the Battle of Midway, and of course that might well prove true in the case of Ukraine, it might well be a war that's decided by attrition. Who is willing to go further and to give more and to sacrifice more? But in the case of the Battle of Midway, one thing that's interesting is it's a naval battle, and naval battles tend to lead to conclusions that are more dramatic, more self-evident. And in the case of the Battle of Midway, at the end of the battle, relatively early on, the Japanese lose 4 carriers and the Americans lose only 1. And that is just such a clear result that it's apparent to some in the battle that it is a turning point. So there's, in fact, 2 aviators. One is a Douglas Dauntless dive bomber pilot. The other is a torpedo bomber pilot, John Waldron. And they both say on the day that this is a turning point. So they recognize that something of enormous impact has happened. Yes.
Indeed, because my sense at the moment is we don't know whether we've already seen a turning point in the Ukraine war or whether, as you just touched on there, actually it's a war of attrition. I was talking earlier to a former colonel in the armed forces who was sort of talking about that long war of attrition. Just finally, I mean, that's where you think the Ukraine war could be. It's a war of attrition rather than an individual turning point.
Yes, it could well be decided by heart.
By heart.
Something that, something that we are celebrating ourselves in our own way, you know, because that is very much what I think this Jubilee occasion represents. It's about the strength of the British heart.
It certainly is, Stephen. Thank you so much for your thoughts there on what was a turning point in 80 years ago in the Pacific War, in the Second World War. We then had D-Day in Europe. And, of course, what is the turning point, if there is one, in the Ukraine war, which is why I wanted to touch on that. Thank you so much, Stephen McGregor, who wrote that book, Silver Waterfall, that has just come out. We're going to head back to present-day events here in the UK, the Jubilee celebrations, and Penny is in Chelmsford. Good afternoon, Penny. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Good afternoon to you.
What's on your mind? What?
I would have more, as I said to the young lady before, I'd have more time for the old lady, the Queen. My parents come from London, okay? My dad, they both came through the war. My dad was a submariner in the Royal Navy. My mum, like most people in London, did their best in the Blitz and everything else on the fire watches and stuff. I'd have more time for the royal family if they'd spent their time, instead of inviting dignitaries from around the world and having a good time afterwards, if they'd actually invited the people in this country who'd actually come through the war and fought with everybody else to keep her nation safe.
Interesting thoughts there. I mean, because actually I would say, and I don't know sort of back then, but now I think actually... people invited, I think I understand, many of the people at the party yesterday will have been from some of the charities that the royal family are often patrons of and things. So I think there is a better sense of that, but perhaps you feel that, do you feel that was taken too long or isn't enough even now?
Oh, mate, that's just through the system. They never meet the ordinary people. And when they do meet them, you don't get a chance to talk to them.
Do you not think, though, Penny, that the people running charities, involved in charities, actually, that is ordinary people trying to do their bit, trying to help, and that's what drives the charitable sector, isn't it?
Well, maybe, yes, today's different, but all I'm saying is it would have been nice years ago if the people who'd put their lives on the line...
Yes.
Had some kind of, I mean, my mum and dad weren't treated well afterwards. They had nothing. When we were small, in the early 50s, they went without food because they didn't have enough, but all they could do was feed the children. They didn't have enough for themselves. So I'm talking about people who came through unbelievable stuff that most people nowadays, my generation, have no idea about.
No, I think that is right, and actually returning... forces very often, in a sense, in the joy of peace, often get forgotten about. That's really your point, is it, Penny?
I think people forget what our previous generations have done for this country and kept it safe.
No, that's
a small island.
I think there's a point very well made, Penny. I think, and in a sense, we've enjoyed peace for so long. We can become complacent. Thank you so much, Penny, for your call from Chelmsford about that. That was Penny saying, actually, have the royal family, have the Queen, in years gone by, have they done enough for those who served in the armed forces, who helped out? And perhaps the answer is that they didn't. I suspect that we've all learnt over the years on that. But I welcome your thoughts, your views on that. Lots of tweets and messages coming in. I'll be getting to those after we go for the break. You know where you are. It's 0344 499 1000. It's Tice Talk, and it is Talk TV. Welcome back to Tice Talk. We're well into the third and final hour of my show. It is, we're into the afternoon. It's still a bit grey and miserable out there, but I want to now find out what's the latest on the Queen. Is there any prospect of her attending the great People's Pageant that's going past Buckingham Palace this afternoon, setting off at 2:30? And so I'm able to be joined by Rupert Bell, who is, I think, down in amongst the crowds, enjoying the setting. Rupert, are you with us? What's the latest news?
No confirmation one way or another about the Queen's participation this afternoon. Last-minute rehearsals have been going on in front of the palace. I heard a dancing Queen was belting out a few about an hour ago.
Fantastic song.
So they were rehearsing what they're going to be doing in the pageant. I've just seen the Duke and Duchess of Cornwall speed past me in their motorcade back into Clarence House, which is no more than a couple of hundred yards away from where I'm talking to you from, having been to the Oval, where there was a giant lunch that they were visiting, and thankfully it's not raining. So they've been down there. They've just come back now to Clarence House, and obviously will be part of the celebrations this afternoon. But we yet to have confirmed one way or another about the Queen's participation. Fingers crossed. The fact that we haven't heard anything, I think we can try and hopefully believe is good news, because clearly we knew about St Paul's Cathedral on the afternoon of Thursday. We knew about the Derby as well on Friday, full 24 hours before. So on that basis, you'd hope that the plans are for her very much to attend. But again, it's speculation on my behalf. Fingers crossed that she will be able to participate, because the crowds are enormous. And when I came out through the tube stations, I mean, I'm amazed. You look at the end of the Mall, where all the people have congregated outside the ticketed area. It is incredible. And the tube it felt like a rush hour on a Monday morning.
Amazing.
Well, not tomorrow morning, because I believe there's a tube strike. But anyway, but certainly today it was extremely busy. All ages getting off the tube here at Green Park, near where I'm talking to you from, and really just trying to enjoy the day. Okay, it's a bit damp, but it's not raining at the moment, so a bit damp and chilly. So fingers crossed that the spectacle is able to be conducted in as good as weather as we could anticipate, given the initial prognosis.
Rupert, let's hope the weather gets better, and let's hope that the news gets better and better, that the Queen is able to attend from the balcony the People's Pageant this afternoon that set us off at 2:30. Rupert Bell, thank you so much indeed for calling in with that latest update on the position of whether or not the Queen will be able to attend. So thanks for that. And we've got loads of messages coming in, loads of tweets. A couple of things I just wanted to pick up first. First of all, there were some concerns. The caller earlier, Amanda, who was calling. The reason that we had to finish the conversation was because I had to go to the news break. But we'd had a chat about vaccines. She has called before, so I just wanted to make that point clear. And then there was another message here from Tim, who has tweeted in, why did I drop the exchange rate discussion with Howard? That's a good point. I'm sorry we didn't get back to that, Tim, but you raised the really interesting point. And exchange rates between the US dollar and the pound sterling does have an impact on fuel prices here. For example, Tim quite rightly says, back in 2008, the oil price was $140 a barrel, but petrol was only $1.18 because the exchange rate was so different. Then it was $1 US was, sorry, there was $1.95 US to a pound, as opposed to currently it's about $1.25. So a strong US dollar means a higher fuel price here. Thanks for that reminder, Tim. And then others who are interested in the interview with Howard Cox, you can watch that again or download it. YouTube is probably the place to go in order to catch that up over the next 24 hours, because there's lots of discussion and interest in that call, and I'll be doing that with Howard every what are we doing? Every month. So we're going to go to Suffolk, where I think I've got Hans on the line. Good afternoon, Hans. How are you?
Yeah. Afternoon, Richard. How are you?
Great. What's on your mind? Are you in celebratory mood this weekend? Or...
Yeah. We had a lovely time. No, I was ringing up about the people moaning about that Lenny fella rang earlier, and the lady who was saying that, that they don't recognise the people who serve and what have you.
Yes.
Well, they do. And I served in the Falklands, and I was involved in, like, a nasty incident after the Falklands, after we got back, and ended up in hospital in Exeter. And Prince Charles came and visited me and spent about 15 minutes with me. No forewarning that he was coming. Apart from like maybe 5 minutes before the nurses came in, padded the pillows and everything like that. And I just wanted to say that.
That's fantastic. That's such a great real life example of actually, some of the wonderful sort of compassion and inspiration that members of the royal family give.
They do, but nobody reads about it because they do it quietly without wanting to hit the papers and what have you.
So that was shortly after you returned from the Falklands.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I was returning from leave after the Falklands. Yeah.
No, that's really good to hear for that, Hans. Thank you very much. So, have you got this afternoon an event to go to, or have you been celebrating and you're finished?
We've got a little courtyard here. We've got flags and bunting up and cake and a bit of champers and what have you, and beers, obviously.
That's fantastic. Well, Hans, enjoy that. Thank you so much. And indeed, thanks for your service to the country in the armed forces. Just really keen to say that. Thank you. That was Hans in Suffolk, who was actually sort of saying how, just a real example of how quietly members of the royal family, in this case Prince Charles, came to visit him in hospital, again to thank him for his service and to hope that he was getting better. We've got loads of messages coming in. What's one here? Oh, that's right. Well, yes, Nick Dubois, he's taking a break from presenting. And so Tina says, can't believe we've let Talk TV has let Nick Dubois go. Why'd you get rid of the good presenters while keeping some of the other terrible ones? I don't know whether that's a reference to me or someone else. But anyway, there we go. Who knows? And we've got another one coming in here, which is Darls, who says, I think it's Darls, he says, just announced we've enjoyed peace for so long, you've forgotten we're involved in Bosnian war and Iraq war. Yes, that's right. But the point is, that's not on our shores, is it? Was really what I was trying to say. And those were specific, localised wars, of course, no doubt about that, as opposed to a broad theatre, a European war, or indeed a world war. That was the point, Darls, I was trying to make, but thanks for your observation nevertheless. Lots of other messages here. What's this? I can't get through that. That's going to be rather long. Anyway, Pablo says, regarding electric cars, our reporter went for a 4-day, 2,000-mile drive in electric vehicle. She spent 18 hours waiting for it to charge and only 16 hours sleeping. That's interesting. There's no question, if you've got an electric car, you have got to work out your charging routine. I know, I've got one. It just takes a slightly different mindset. But anyway, keep those calls and those messages coming. I'm enjoying those. Hopefully you are too. And that coming up after the news, we're going to be talking to Alex Munton about gas, the direction of gas prices, gas supply, and the impact on all of us. You know the number. It's Tice Talk. It's the home of common sense. It is Talk TV.
What was my biggest career moment? After spending about 25 years in Fleet Street, there's loads of stories I could tell you. But actually, I think I did an overnight show for Talk Radio in the early days, the night of the Brexit referendum. And that was actually quite a milestone because, of course, we started off thinking that Remain had won. And at 2:30, 2:45, after Nigel Farage had already said he'd lost, it turned out he hadn't lost. And it turned out we were leaving the European Union. So that was quite a shocker.
This is Talk TV News.
Good afternoon, I'm Zora Suleiman. It's the final day of Platinum Jubilee celebrations, which are expected to end on a high, come rain or shine. A thunderstorm warning is in place for England and Wales, but it's hoped that won't stop crowds turning out for a parade and pageant in London later. Around 10,000 people, including 6,000 performers, will be involved in staging a nearly 2-mile-long carnival procession. In other news, the Transport Secretary has insisted that the Prime Minister would win a vote of no confidence. Speculation is growing that Boris Johnson will face a vote this week after dozens of his own MPs called for him to resign. But Grant Shapps says he doesn't think the numbers are there.
I do wish, as media could sort of lift their eyes above what one MP says, or even, as you say, what 30 MPs say. If it's going to happen, it happens. I don't think it's about it. We'll see. And I assume if it doesn't happen, we can come back and have a sensible discussion about all the things that actually matter to people.
Missiles have hit the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, after a period of relative calm in the city. Mayor Vitaly Klitschko says there's been no deaths reported so far. It comes as the UK Ministry of Defence says counterattacks by Ukraine have blunted Russian momentum in the city of Severodonetsk. The governor of the Luhansk region suggested the city is now split in half between Ukrainian and Russian forces. And people in southern Florida are being warned not to travel. It's as a life-threatening storm moves across the state. Forecasters predict Tropical Storm Alex could bring 10 inches of rain. It's already left 3 people dead and damaged properties in Cuba. Well, that's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Welcome back to Tice Talk. We're in the final half hour of my show this afternoon. Well, that's a bit of luck. I raised the point earlier about Tina, who emailed in surprised that Nick Dubois was no longer presenting, and I wondered whether or not the reference to a useless presenter was a reference to me. But luckily, Tina has tweeted in during the break to say, no, Richard, her tweet was not directed at me. She enjoys my show. Well, I hope most people are, even if not everybody. But there we are. Now, I've always been very focused and continue to be focused on energy prices because that is what is driving the cost of living crisis. And my concern is this is not a temporary spike. We touched on it earlier with Andrew Montford about renewables, but we really need to understand what's going on with the gas market. Is it global? Is it domestic? Is it regional? And I'm delighted now to be joined as my final guest of the show by Alex Munton, who is the Director of Gas Research at Rapidon Energy. Alex, a very good afternoon. Thanks for joining me on Tice Talk. So we all know and are experiencing and are suffering these huge energy price increases, and there's a variety of reasons for that. My question really is, clearly with sanctions on Russia and a desire to reduce dependency across Europe, and indeed to a less degree in the UK on Russian gas, that means that all of us, nations, are going to be seeking to acquire gas from elsewhere in the world. How easy is it for gas producers to increase their capacity, increase their supply, in the same way that when the oil price goes up, the oil producers increase their supply of oil?
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. This is the big question. Russia is such an important supplier that once you start removing some of that supply from the market, either because customers decide that they want less of it or Russia decides that it wants to supply less of it, then that's got to be made up from other sources. And really what we're talking about is LNG. The gas that is sold from various producing areas through a process of liquefaction that can allow gas to be transported by ship and make its way all around the world. Now, the LNG market has been growing, and there's certainly some available supply that can be pulled on to make up any shortfall or gap. But it's a very long-term investment. It's certainly not something that can just be switched on overnight. And really, the key point is that when LNG projects are built, and they take years to really, from start to finish for construction, they are designed to operate at capacity. So with the capacity that exists now, there's very little that can be cranked up to squeeze more out of. And certainly there's scope to build more over time, but that's exactly the point. It does take time. It's not going to just happen.
So the main
immediately.
producers of the gas that is transported as LNG, liquefied natural gas, are whom? It's Qatar, and is it the States?
Yeah, there's three big ones, and you've mentioned two. There's Qatar in the Middle East, there's the United States, and there's Australia. And they're all sort of neck and neck in terms of the biggest LNG producers globally. They produce combined, just to give you some figures, about 250 million tons of LNG. In a global market, that's about 400. So just those three producers actually represent more than half of all the world's supply.
Just say those numbers again, Alex, because those are really significant. Those three produce how much?
So about 80 million tons of LNG per annum each, roughly speaking, give or take. So that's 80 times 3, that's about 240, within a world where there is, in total, about 400 million tons of capacity.
So they're essentially producing about 60% of the market, but you're saying essentially that market's been operating at capacity. And this is my point. So, and the process of actually creating LNG, you've got to liquefy the gas. You then put it in the ships, and then you've got to re-vaporize it at the other end. And there's huge infrastructure involved. How long does it take to build that infrastructure to increase the supply?
Yeah, these are huge projects. I mean, once you get to the point where you can start to build the facility, and there's a lot of planning and engineering that goes on ahead of that point, but once you can actually start putting shovels in the ground, you're looking at really 3 years minimum before you can start to produce meaningful supplies of LNG. You know, what's interesting is that it's 3 years at best, but it can be a lot longer than that. And we've seen it's just difficult in some parts of the world, particularly if you're in very remote regions. You know, geology is not necessarily always placed to the... Yeah.
Indeed, so it's 3 years of infrastructure. And, of course, you've got to build more ships, is that right? More LNG ships?
Yeah, you've got to invest right through the value chain. So there's a huge amount of investment that goes into constructing the facilities, the ships to get LNG from supply to where it's required, and then the regasification terminals themselves. So there's a huge amount of infrastructure investment that's required to make this all happen.
So essentially that means that if European countries want to wean themselves off Russian gas, that's why it's going to take them so long, because it's going to take so long to build the extra other facilities.
Yes, but there's a very important additional point that needs to be made in here, which is it's not just the length of time that it takes to bring new LNG to market. It's the length of time that you need to make those investments profitable. They don't suddenly become profitable from day one. Once you've spent the many billions of dollars to bring that new capacity online, it's maybe a 10, 15-year type of investment payback period.
So people,
and really, it's the...
People want to know that there's going to be long-term contracts to justify it.
This is exactly the issue, and this is the spot we're in right now with European energy security. It's can the European market, can European buyers commit to buying LNG, whether it's from the United States or from Qatar, long-term, to give the investor the confidence that it's going to get paid back, it won't lose money on its investment. And unfortunately, this is the bind we're in. Because from a European policy standpoint, where the emphasis has been we don't want to be consuming natural gas, we don't want to be consuming fossil fuels by 2030, it creates an enormous amount of uncertainty and difficulty to then move forward on those investments.
And of course, just finally, Alex, using LNG and transporting it halfway around the world, I understand that creates a lot more CO2.
Well, there is an emissions footprint associated with LNG. I mean, there's a need to look at it in the sort of entire life cycle, and certainly from a relative to coal, if gas is being used to substitute coal.
I was just thinking relative to domestic gas, shale gas, for example.
Yeah, I mean, you would need to sort of look at the entire
CO2 footprint. Alex, I've got to go to the break. Thank you so much indeed for your thoughts. That's Alex Munton with some fascinating thoughts about the challenges of actually getting to more LNG gas. Anyway, we'll be coming back to that after the break. Stay with us. It's Tice Talk. It's Talk TV. Welcome back to Tice Talk. We're into the last 15 minutes before the amazing, the wonderful Trisha Goddard is with you for the next 3 hours from 1 till 4. And then, of course, it is Kevin O'Sullivan. So lots to look forward to through the rest of this final day of the Jubilee weekend. A couple of messages here before we go to our callers. Sebastian says transporting liquid gas across the globe is ludicrous. Let's use the next 50 years to build up massive nuclear capacity, electric capacity in the UK. Meanwhile, extract our own shale gas, frack for gas, whilst homes and industry migrate to electric. Both phases self-sufficient. That's the point, self-sufficiency, so you're not reliant on others, and therefore you're much less vulnerable. Thanks for that from Sebastian. Other interesting one here from Pablo, who says CO2 can help make the world greener. There we are. actually it is true that the world is, I think, about 7% greener over the last 20 to 30 years than before. Anyway, let's go to a couple of calls before we finish. Andrew's in London. Good afternoon, Andrew.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm all right. How are you doing? Are you on your way to any celebrations, or have you done that, or are you not interested?
I've been working, unfortunately, through it all.
Bad luck.
So,
yeah, we know how it feels.
So,
what's on your mind, Andrew?
So I was just sort of speaking to like your producer about the possibility of there being a commemorative medal of veterans who have served like the Queen during her reign. So you know, like there's a lot of people out there, you know, that have either served in the forces or the police, fire brigade, and I just thought it would have been a nice touch for some sort of medal for those guys who have served Her Majesty during her reign, and not just for the guys who are serving currently.
It's a very good point, Andrew. And did you serve yourself?
No, I have served, but you know, like I think it would have just been a nice bit of recognition. You know, like this, Her Majesty's achievement will never be sort of seen again. Definitely not in my lifetime, and probably not in anyone else's lifetime. So, you know, she could like a nice commissioned medal.
Yes.
For those that want it. Not everyone's going to want it. I just thought it would have been a nice touch just to say thank you for your service.
Indeed, because obviously, you know, many individual campaigns do get specific medals, don't they? What you're referring to is those who served in the armed forces or police, for example, but weren't involved in a specific campaign. Is that right?
Yeah, there is like platinum Jubilee medals. You do get like the Jubilee medals, but I'm thinking for the people that have. For those that have served the Queen during her reign,
yes,
you know, it would have been a nice sort of additional touch for them to say thank you very much. It's my 70th year. This is for you.
Very good point, Andrew. Very well made. Thank you very much indeed for that, and thank you for your service as well. That was Andrew, wondering whether or not there could be a medal for all of those who served during her reign. Thanks for that. We're going to head now from London southwest to Dorset, where Derek is on the line. Good afternoon, Derek.
You know, Richard, you're all right. Kevin's all right. There's a couple of presenters I'd get rid of.
Thank you, Derek. What's on? Thank
all right
you
as well. So your job's safe.
Oh, bless you. What's on your mind, Derek?
Just quickly, there's too many medals knocking about. People, you know, I see these people with chestfuls of medals. I got one or two in the Korean War, and I earned them. You got to be careful you don't devalue medals. Anyhow, I met Princess Anne. She come in to see. I set up the first drug course in Holloway. I did about 6 or 7 things to rehabilitate people, and I spent the day with her. Now, she is a hard-working royal who goes about her business in a quiet way, and it makes me wonder why she wasn't third in line for the throne. She was certainly a friend of the prison service when no one else is. They look on prison service as a necessary evil. And I remember walking around with her in the prison, and the drug smugglers was complaining about the long sentences to her. And she turned around to them and said, well, that's what society thinks of you. Isn't that right, Mr. My name, which I won't say?
Yes.
She had the guts, you know, straight to look them in the face and say, well, basically you shouldn't be smuggling drugs. And I was very impressed with her. She gets on with her business in a quiet way. Prince Charles, incidentally, got street names altered in Poundbury to include the Dorset Regiment's battle honours. He was very helpful when I wrote to him. He wrote back.
So you've overall then, Derek, you've had good experiences, and they've come back to you with your interactions with members of the royal family. Is that right?
That's correct, and even the Queen wrote back to me, supported me when I'll quickly say this, I know you're running out of time. 14 years I've been campaigning to get women recognised through British history. They were at the Battle of Trafalgar. In Whitehall, you'll find a tribute to World War II ladies. I tried to get that altered to include the woman that was blown up making munitions in the World War I all over England. The nurses was in the trenches, and that memorial in Whitehall just mentions World War II ladies. That is an injustice. 3 presidents of the British Legion agree with me. For 12 years I've been writing a letter. I wrote to the Queen. She obviously agreed with me. She ordered my letter be sent to the Prime Minister.
And has it happened, Derek?
No, the flunkies got hold of it.
The bureaucrats got hold of it.
But if you ever get a politician on, please ask them, Richard, why isn't women recognised more on that memorial in Whitehall?
Well, one thing is for sure, you are so right that actually women made a massive, massive contribution to the war effort, not just in World War II, but obviously in World War One, and there's no question that it should be properly recognised.
Edith Cattell was executed by the Germans in Belgium. They were at the Battle of Trafalgar. Even, you see, the parades.
Absolutely.
All around London, there's statues. I mean...
Well, Derek, keep writing, and if I come across a politician that I think is worth a pinch of salt to mention it to, I will definitely do that. Derek, great to hear from you. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the Jubilee celebration. Before we go to Tricia, lots of messages coming in. Here, one from Shoba who says, Richard, you really should be out on the streets canvassing instead of sitting inside a radio station. Well, that's where I'll be tomorrow, campaigning and canvassing. I'm trying to multitask and do a little bit of everything. But thanks for that. Then another one from here, Richard, who says, why don't electric cars have removable batteries? Just pull into SO and pay to swap it. I think the thing is, you'll find that actually these batteries are enormous to run electric cars. Certainly the one that on the car that I've got is absolutely vast. It's not just like a small battery in a combustion engine that you see. I think that's the... But who knows, maybe in the future the size of the batteries will reduce their efficiency, their capacity, and that may be one of the ways through it, because there's no question at the moment the issue of charging electric cars is the big constraint. The speed of it, that's what definitely holds things back. And finally, one nice message here who says, Richard, what lessons will you take when from the groupthink amongst central bankers at the Bank of England, the Fed and people who think that inflation will be transitory, as opposed to, I guess, the inference being medium term? Well, the only way it's going to be transitory is if actually we get prices down again. And the way to do that is to cut energy prices, cut the unnecessary taxes, create more growth. That way you will get inflation down. Otherwise, I am concerned it's here for much, much longer. Talking of being here for the next 3 hours, you have, of course, the joy and the delight of Tricia Goddard, who is going to take us through the afternoon. But just before I welcome Tricia, good news, folks. Yes, England have won the first test against New Zealand. Fantastic. Joe Root has done brilliantly there with that. Tricia, are you a good afternoon to you? Happy Jubilee.
Good afternoon.
Do you follow cricket at all?
I like the... Well, you know, I'm kind of lucky because I'm British, so I can follow the British team. I'm of West Indian heritage, so I can follow them. And I'm also have an Australian passport, so I'm just going to cheer for whoever wins.
Oh, that's definitely called sitting in the fence and cheating, Tricia. What's going on?
Is it? Well, first of all, let me just say your caller, Derek, you know, lauding, you know, more women being recognised in war. fantastic. I love you, Derek. Every Sunday we have our faith panel. We have a faith panel where we look at news headlines through the eyes of clergy or people in the faith. So we're going to do that. Also, we have a doctor in the house. And because we have Jubilee, we're looking at health and the kind of health issues surrounding a 96-year-old. Some of the things that the Queen or other 96-year-olds or 90-year-olds might be going through. So we do both of that. Of course, we're crossing live to one of the many, many street parties. We're going up to Manchester to see what they're getting on with there. And yes, we've got a whole lot of things coming up. Brilliant. Light and shade, some fun, some heavier.
And have you been able to attend any parties in the US over this weekend?
But you know what? I've got a crown here, Richard. I went shopping with this crown on, right? and I had my Union Jack Marks and Spencer shopping bag, and everybody thought I was on a bachelorette weekend, which is what they call a hen night. I got so cross. I think I educated everybody in the grocery aisle. I said, it's our Jubilee.
Fantastic. You've done your